Imagine yourself in a room, the kind of room where nothing is ever quite what it seems. The scent of old leather-bound books lingers in the air, mixing with the soft hum of a single desk lamp flickering in the quiet corner. The gentle scratch of a pen on paper fills the silence, each word deliberate, each stroke a carefully measured action in the web of secrets being spun around you. Outside the room, faint sounds drift in the murmur of distant voices, too distant to make out, but enough to remind you that the world continues without you. No, it was a life built on constant vigilance, on secrecy and uncertainty. In the shadows of occupied Europe, in the hidden corners of Asia, and in the midst of the vast Pacific Ocean, intelligence was as crucial as any weapon, and deliberate, and where the stakes are so high, yet so unseen. But in World War II it evolved into something unprecedented. This war, unlike any before it, wasn't only fought with tanks, troops, and bombs. It was a battle of intelligence and deception, a quiet war where messages carried more weight than rifles, and codebreakers wielded power as influential as generals. The war shifted when a small group of British codebreakers at Bletchley Park cracked it. In the Middle East, covert agents infiltrated enemy lines and sabotaged supply chains, disrupting Axis powers before they could even execute their plans. In France, members of the resistance sent intelligence to the Allies, while engaging in sabotage missions against the Nazi regime. In the Soviet Union, spies gathered details on the Axis powers and their potential plans. Despite being surrounded by the overwhelming forces of the Nazis, each message exchanged wasn't just a piece of information, it was a life or death decision, a critical moment in the delicate dance of war. Picture the cool, dry paper in your hands, each letter typed and folded with the utmost care. As you prepare to hand off the vital message, you can feel the weight of the knowledge contained within. As the keys strike, they encode information that can't be revealed to anyone outside this circle. As you drift into this world, feel the weight of secrecy that filled these spaces. The sound of silence is louder here, where nothing is truly what it seems, and everything is a carefully calculated risk. The sound of ink on paper, the rustle of hidden compartments, the shifting gaze of a trusted contact. Each of these elements comes together, crafting a reality that exists just beneath the surface of everyday life. There is something both comforting and terrifying in knowing that you are part of something far greater, yet also so isolated, so invisible. Imagine the weight of knowing that a single misstep could expose a network of spies, topple governance, or lead to the destruction of entire cities. In the Pacific, American spies worked tirelessly to uncover Japanese troop movements and deciphered their battle strategies. That contributed to decisive victories such as the Battle of Midway. For those working in the shadows, every interaction, every disguised letter, every coded message could be the difference between life and death, between success and failure. The breaking of the Enigma code became one of the most celebrated intelligence triumphs in history, but only those in the know truly understood its impact on the course of the war. In this world, silence is louder than any roar, and the work done behind closed doors has the power to shift the entire war. It's in these moments, when you pass a sealed envelope to a fellow agent or make a seemingly inconsequential gesture, that the fate of entire armies could be sealed. These are the moments that are felt, not just seen, when the world becomes a game of ciphers, codes, and hidden meanings. But by the time World War II began, espionage had transformed. The rise of radio technology, cryptography, and radar systems opened up new methods of warfare, methods that didn't just rely on brute strength, but on wit, intelligence, and subtlety. Spies didn't just collect information, they altered the course of history with every covert operation. Each cryptic message, and every carefully placed infiltration into enemy lines. It was about moving between worlds that never quite aligned, where one false step, one unintended glance, could reveal a lifetime of work and expose a mission. But beyond the tension and secrecy, it was also a world of incredible intelligence, brilliance, and the quiet, uncelebrated acts that ultimately shaped the war. They used it to monitor, manipulate, and control both the battlefield and the home front. The Allies, realizing they were at a disadvantage, quickly built their own covert operations in response. From occupied Paris to the deserts of North Africa, from the Pacific Islands to the streets of London, spies were everywhere, working to uncover secrets, disrupt plans, and send critical messages back to their command centers. You shift slightly, feeling the subtle creak of floorboards beneath your feet as the world outside fades into the background. The room is dim, and as you sit there, you can't shake the sense of being watched. The faint hum of a passing car is the only sound in the street, but even it feels like a reminder everything is close, yet far away. In this world, you are a shadow part of something far bigger, something hidden in plain sight. In the quiet corners of history, where wars are not fought with bombs and soldiers, but with codes, deception, and secrecy, there are those who navigate the fine line between life and death. These are the spies of World War II. Their daily life wasn't about marching into battle or charging across open fields. Espionage was not a side note in World War II. It was integral to the war's outcome. So let yourself settle into this world, where every sound feels louder than it is, where every movement feels measured. Espionage, or the act of gathering secret information, is as old as civilization itself. The use of spies had existed in various forms throughout history. Think of the spies sent during ancient war, or even the shadowy agents in the times of the Renaissance. At the start of the war, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan took to espionage with relentless precision. One of the most significant examples of espionage in World War II is the Enigma machine, which encoded German military communications in an almost unbreakable cipher. Espionage during World War II was a global affair, stretching far beyond the borders of Europe. In every occupied country, spies were working under constant threat. The nature of espionage, especially in World War II, meant that nothing was ever as it seemed. This hidden world of espionage was one of tension and risk. Now, as you settle deeper into this world, imagine the subtle sensations that define the life of a spy. The whisper of conversation is always just loud enough to hear, never enough to be noticed. Even the click of a typewriter becomes a rhythm in this world, almost meditative. The world of espionage during World War II was not one of noise or grandeur, it was one of quiet, subtle tensions, where every glance, every gesture could carry meaning. Imagine, for a moment, slipping into the life of a spy during World War II. You wake up in a modest, dimly lit room that smells faintly of stale air, the heavy weight of secrecy hanging over you. It's a life lived in the margins, where the ordinary details of daily life, walking, become an intricate dance of constant vigilance. The world around you, though seemingly normal, is anything but. Every interaction, every glance, every word spoken carries the potential for discovery, for exposure. You learn to watch people more than you speak to them. What they do speaks volumes more than what they say. You can't afford to overlook small details that may seem trivial to others. You're always second-guessing every word you say, every choice you make. You might go to a cafe, sit at a table in the corner, and order a drink, but your mind is analyzing everything. There are no quiet moments of relief, no sanctuary. Your apartment, once a place of rest, is now just another part of the game. Every letter, every package, every phone call is scrutinized for potential threats. Even the mundane becomes a part of your covert life. You keep identities ready at hand, like hidden costumes in a wardrobe, and when it's time, you slip into them like an actor preparing for a performance, not knowing if this role will lead to another escape or your last act. What's the tone of the conversation at the next table? Every task, no matter how small, becomes a high-stakes game of observation and decision. Every room you enter, every person you speak to, carries potential danger. There is no such thing as a simple moment. The war you fight is not on a battlefield, it's in every quiet, unseen corner of the world, in every seemingly trivial exchange. Are you being watched? Is that person glancing at you too often, or are they simply bored? The world you once knew, full of casual friendships and carefree moments, has been replaced by a world of surveillance. A world where trust is fleeting and where secrecy reigns supreme. You are never seen for who you truly are. The mask you wear becomes your reality. It's a world where nothing is ever fully safe, and every choice is a carefully calculated step into the unknown. You walk through crowds, blend into the background, and observe from the shadows. But all the while you're longing for a sense of normality, for a return to a life where the world wasn't defined by constant suspicion and the fear of exposure. Your mind races, always calculating, always assessing, always looking for the next dangerous shift in the rhythm of life. The way a door opens, the echo of footsteps on different surfaces, the way shadows fall on a street corner, all of it is part of the complex dance that determines whether or not you're re-exposed. Even waiting becomes a charged experience. The quiet hum of your thoughts blends with the faint sound of footsteps in the distance. You listen closely. Too close could be a trap. Too far could be a signal. The smallest shift in posture, a fleeting glance, or the timing of a handshake could reveal more than the words exchange. You are never truly at ease, always walking the thin line between invisibility and danger. The slightest deviation from normal behavior can indicate a hidden agenda. If someone is tense, you sense it. If they seem overly relaxed in a situation that should make them anxious, to be cautious. Every word spoken has a second layer of meaning, and you constantly weigh its implications. Even the silence between words is telling. Your mental state is one of unrelenting alertness. The anxiety isn't always loud, but it's there, like a low hum in the background, ever present and exhausting. Every action, every step, every word is measured. Imagine walking into a room, feeling the eyes of others on you, and knowing that you must mask your emotions, mask your thoughts, at all times. You are never allowed to let your guard down, not even for a moment. You may stop at a street vendor, casually buy a piece of bread. But while you're doing this, your mind is scanning the surroundings, processing every detail. How many people are in the vicinity? Who's moving too quickly, too cautiously? Who's looking at you a little too intently? What's the pattern of footsteps behind you? You learn to sense when someone is following you, even before you see them. It's a skill, honed through constant practice, but it also wears on you. Your brain becomes a radar, always on the lookout for something that doesn't belong. When you step outside, you are no longer just you, are a mask, a carefully constructed persona, one that must stay intact no matter the circumstances. What seems like a normal day walking to the market, visiting a friend becomes a calculated operation, a test of your ability to blend in, to remain unnoticed. The moment you leave your room, you are immediately immersed in a world of uncertainty. You know that every passerby could be someone who recognizes you, or worse, someone who is watching you. Every stranger's glance might be a signal that they are not who they seem. You are trained for this, of course. You have been taught to observe everything, to notice even the smallest details that might give away a hidden agenda. Even when your actions seem mundane, there is nothing casual about them. Every interaction becomes a test of your ability to stay calm, to maintain composure under the pressure of potentially being discovered. You are taught to read people's behavior with near-perfect accuracy. On a mission, the stakes are even higher. But it's not just about watching and listening, it's about living under a constant psychological strain. The constant need to remain alert, the weight of knowing that your life could change in an instant, takes its toll. Even when you return home, the pressure doesn't ease. This is the life of a spy. Nothing is ever ordinary. In the world of espionage, the pressure never lets up. Even the very act of being invisible, a spy's most important skill, becomes a suffocating, isolating existence. In this world, a spy's life is not just an occupation, it's a psychological burden, one that carries the weight of constant vigilance, emotional isolation, and the knowledge that each moment could be the one where everything unravels. Imagine yourself slipping into the life of a spy during World War II. The early morning light filters through the thin curtains, casting shadows that stretch like long fingers across the room. The faint smell of old leather-bound books and the musty scent of paper fill the air. You're sitting at a small desk, perhaps in a room, in a nondescript apartment, in Paris, or a hidden flat in Berlin, where nothing feels ordinary, yet nothing is explicitly out of place. The familiar streets, where once you might have strolled with ease, now hold potential danger at every corner. The scent of freshly baked bread mixes with the warmth of coffee brewing in the corner. It's a place you've been to before, an ordinary setting, yet nothing is ever ordinary for you. As you step inside, the small bell above the door rings with a quiet chime. But your attention shifts immediately to the person sitting near the window. They're speaking with a companion, but you notice the way their fingers twitch as they adjust a cigarette in their hand, or the too long glance they give you before turning away. There are no marks, no hidden signs that would give away the message eats, just ordinary correspondence. As you type out your messages, there is a rhythm to the action, a gentle consistency that brings a semblance of order to the chaos. The clicking sound is more than just a noise, it becomes your heartbeat, the pulse of your existence in a world that never stops moving, never stops shifting. You feel the weight of solitude in the midst of the crowd. You don't engage deeply with anyone, and even if you do, there's a barrier, a wall of secrecy that makes true connection impossible. The constant separation from others, the solitude in the middle of a crowd, becomes part of the rhythm of your life. You've learned to accept it, to live with it, though it always feels like a quiet ache in the back of your mind. The world continues on, but you are a spectator, watching it from behind a veil of your own making. It is not physical distance, but something deeper, an emotional distance, born from the need to remain hidden, from the necessity of never truly revealing yourself. Even as you sit in the cafe, sipping your coffee, there's an undeniable, aching longing for something more. A real conversation, A life that is not lived in the shadows. People talk around you, walk past you, and yet you are always just slightly removed from them. They don't know you. They don't know that beneath your casual demeanor lies a mind constantly calculating, constantly weighing every interaction, every word. It's a strange relief, the mechanical rhythm of the typewriter, as it captures the thoughts you must carefully conceal, the secrets that must never escape the machine. Yet, in your hands, it feels like a trap, like the weight of its contents is too great for anyone to bear. It is a quiet sanctuary, the clattering keys offering a sense of control amidst the constant uncertainty. Here, in this small moment, you are safe, but you know that the peace is fleeting, that as soon as you leave the room, you are once again vulnerable to the shifting tides of a world full of danger, full of people who are as skilled in deception as you are. This is the life of a spy. Surrounded by constant noise, the chatter of the world, the sounds of ordinary life, yet cut off from it all. The sound of your own thoughts is often the only thing that can be heard clearly. These small details are not unnoticed. The rhythm of the room becomes your own private symphony, the sounds of the bustling world now accompanying the heavy weight of your thoughts. As you walk, you scan your surroundings without even thinking about it. You sit at the table in the corner, your body positioned in such a way that you can observe everything around you without appearing to. Your eyes flick over the other patrons, noting their movements, their body language. You tell yourself that you are calm, yet inside, there is a quiet pulse of adrenaline, the low hum of fear, the ever-present reality that one wrong glance might be enough to give you away. Every moment feels charged, as though the room itself might betray you, as though the air around you is thick with suspicion, too dense for you to breathe fully. Every pedestrian's face, every car that passes by, every subtle shift in the wind, is a clue each, an indicator of who is watching, who might be a threat. The loneliness of espionage is suffocating. Even in the presence of others, you are isolated, cut off from everything you once knew. Your life is no longer your own. It's lived in secrecy, in hidden places, and behind false identities. You are always pretending to be someone else, even when you stand alone. The thought of real connection becomes a distant dream. This is how you move through life, as a shadow, always blending into the background, yet always alert, always calculating. You drink your coffee, slowly, trying to make it appear as though this moment is just like any other, but inside, the thoughts swirl. Is someone watching? Has something changed? Am I being followed? The anxiety doesn't allow for rest, doesn't allow for peace. You are never free, even when sitting in the most casual of settings. The loneliness that comes with this life is different from solitude. It is a place where the mundane and the critical blur together, where every moment is fraught with tension, yet must seem entirely ordinary to those around you. There is a subtle rhythm to this life, one that is constant, but never comforting. The soft sound of a pen scratching paper, the quiet tap of your fingers on the desk, becomes a strangely comforting routine, the only true normalcy in a world of uncertainty. You could almost forget, if you let yourself, that everything around you could be a trap, that at any moment, the wrong word, the wrong gesture, could expose you to the enemy, or worse, to those you thought you trusted. The world outside the room moves in a blur. Cars drive by on the cobblestone streets. Their engine hums a distant sound that somehow reminds you that, though you are alone in this room, you are never truly alone. You live in a world of constant vigilance, and every little detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a clue in the game you're playing. The soft murmur of voices through the walls, the rustling of paper, the occasional creak of floorboards as someone moves through. Building these are all things that you must notice and interpret, for, in the world of espionage, nothing is ever without meaning. You step outside, into the world. Paris is bustling with life, but to you, it's a dangerous place, a city full of faces that might hide anything. You approach a cafe, a regular stop on your daily route. You order a coffee, your voice steady despite the constant undercurrent of tension. Despite the outward calm, you feel a tightening in your chest. The cafe around you continues, patrons laughing softly, the clinking of silverware, the crinkle of a newspaper being unfolded. The sound of paper rustling in your pocket is louder than it should be. You pull it out and unfold the letter. The click of your typewriter keys is oddly comforting. The restlessness in your chest begins to settle, just slightly, as the typewriter's rhythm drowns out the world's noise, if only for a moment. Even as you sit in the bustling cafe, there's a distinct feeling of being apart, not just physically, but emotionally. The space is full, but you are separate. But you know, this is the price you pay for being part of this world. Imagine waking up each day to a life built on lies and identity so carefully constructed that it feels almost real, but isn't. The world sees you as an ordinary person, perhaps a businessman traveling for work, a journalist reporting from foreign lands, or a diplomat attending meetings at embassies. You greet your colleagues, attend meetings, and pass by strangers without so much as a second thought. But inside, you are always on alert, constantly aware that the identity you've so carefully constructed could unravel at any moment. You are a performer on a stage, always in character, never able to take a break from the role. But in the back of your head, you are still calculating. Are they watching me closely? Is anyone suspicious of me? The isolation grows more pronounced as the years go by. The mental strain of juggling two lives becomes debilitating. When you're not working, when you are alone with your own thoughts, you begin to question who you really are anymore. Is this mask becoming me? Who would I be if I could stop pretending? You might stand in front of the mirror just for a moment and stare at the reflection that looks back at you. It's not a comforting moment of self-recognition. It's a moment of disconnection. Who is that person staring back at you? But inside, your mind is working at full capacity. The danger lies in how these gestures can betray you, how a single slip of the tongue, an unintended look, or a misplaced word can bring everything crashing down. You find yourself living in constant fear of misunderstanding. What if you gave away something you shouldn't have? What if you revealed too much? It clings to you with an intensity that you cannot shake, not even in your most private moments. The tension is ever present. It's in your posture, the way you walk, the way you speak. It's in the words you leave unspoken, the details you leave out of every conversation. There is no such thing as a simple exchange. There is always a hidden meaning, a secret code behind every phrase. Lies become a part of you, blending into your thoughts, your gestures, your words, until you are no longer sure where the truth ends and the deception begins. A spy is always walking the tightrope between who they really are and the persona they've created. Eventually, the two begin to blur, and the toll it takes on your identity becomes harder to ignore. Who are you, really? What is left of your true self when everything about you is fabricated? You assess the pressure of their grip too tight, too soft. You analyze their body language. Are they too eager? Is there a hint of suspicion in their eyes? The moment of contact feels like an eternity, and the consequences of a misstep are too great to ignore. Is it the person you've become, or the person you once were before the weight of espionage took over your life? What have I given away in my tone? Even a small detail, such as a shift in posture or an overly emphatic word, could raise the wrong kind of attention. But for a spy, it's loaded with meaning. How firm should the grip be? Should you make eye contact, or is that too intense? Is your palm too clammy? Every small gesture is a piece of the puzzle, and there is always a right way and a wrong way to execute them. The stakes are high, even in the smallest of exchanges. Spies live in a world where secrets are currency, and the weight of keeping those secrets is often too much to bear. Hiding your true self from the world is a form of emotional self-inflicted imprisonment. The people around you, family, friends, colleagues, think they know you, but in reality, they only know the version of you that you allow them to see. No one can, and that, more than anything, is the most draining part of this life. The fact that you can never truly be yourself, that you must always remain hidden, even in the simplest of human interactions, takes its toll. The real you is hidden, cloaked in a veil of half-truths and lies. In those moments, you feel mentally drained, your focus constantly split between the conversation at hand, even the simplest of interactions. Friendly greeting, a casual conversation becomes a performance. The person you're speaking to might be your best friend, but you cannot afford to be authentic. You can never reveal your true thoughts, your real fears, your personal struggles. Your world is built on the need to remain unknown. There is no escape from it, not even in the comfort of a trusted companion. The more time you spend living in this false world, the harder it becomes to differentiate between your true self and the character you've created. It lingers, like a weight that presses against your chest, even as you return to the anonymity of the street. Who can you trust? Who can you share your thoughts with? You realize you've become so used to wearing your mask that even in private, you have to maintain it. You don't talk about your real life. You don't talk about the danger, the fear you carry. Every conversation feels half-lived, because there is always something you must hide. At first, it might feel manageable like a game, almost, but as the days wear on, the toll becomes overwhelming. The constant effort it takes to maintain your cover, to live in secrecy, begins to eat away at you. Each day, You perform your role with such precision and composure that it feels like the most natural thing in the world. But it's not. It's exhausting. The constant shifting between who you are and who you pretend to be wears on your very soul. To the casual observer, you are just another face in the crowd, doing what everyone else does, living a life that seems normal. But underneath this seemingly unremarkable exterior, you are someone else entirely. You are a spy, and every word you say, every decision you make, is part of a larger, invisible game. Your cover story becomes your armor. Each morning, you slip into the persona you've cultivated sometimes so convincingly that even you begin to forget that it's a mask. Living this dual life is not a simple act of deception. It's a mental gymnastics that demands constant focus. Every conversation, every smile, every handshake is meticulously thought through. Your public life, though it appears mundane, is anything but. Beneath the surface, you are constantly aware of your surroundings, always calculating, always thinking, who is watching? Who is listening? What is safe to say? The pressure is immense. In the back of your mind, you know that if you make one wrong move, one moment of carelessness, you risk being exposed. The consequences of exposure are dire. It's a life where mistakes are not forgiven. This constant switching between two identities is mentally exhausting. Imagine attending a meeting, a seemingly mundane task. You sit across from colleagues, your mind completely immersed in the conversation, and when the meeting ends, the mental exhaustion doesn't fade. It's a life spent in constant disguise, where your true thoughts, emotions, and even your dreams remain locked away. But the exhaustion isn't just physical, it's emotional, too. At times, the loneliness is suffocating. At home, in the quiet of your apartment, you feel the weight of your own solitude. Even the most casual interactions carry hidden dangers. A handshake, for example, might seem like a simple form of greeting. Imagine greeting a colleague with a handshake after a long day. On the surface, it's nothing. These social rituals, handshakes, greetings, smiles, even a contact are nothing but masks, carefully constructed and performed. Even moments of genuine connection, those rare times when you can laugh or smile with someone, are tainted by the knowledge that they will never know the real you. The burden of secrecy is an invisible weight. It never leaves you. You live in a world of whispers and half answers, constantly aware that everything you do, everything you say, could expose you. But it's not just the external pressure of maintaining a cover that wears on you. It's the internal fracture that builds up over time. Espionage is a world where secrecy is the highest currency, and communication is the tool that determines the course of nations. In this world, nothing is ever as it seems. To the untrained eye, it's nothing but an ordinary book, its pages seemingly filled with nothing of importance. A closer inspection reveals that it's more than a writing tool. It's a disguised weapon. The barrel of the pen can be unscrewed to reveal a hidden blade, or perhaps a small hidden compartment that contains an invisible ink pad or poison. Often, messages must be decrypted quickly, too long, and the operation could fail. Every meeting is an event carefully orchestrated, a delicate dance where timing, location, and the slightest slip of the tongue could lead to disaster. A bench in the middle of a busy park might serve as a silent exchange point. The alley is narrow, the shadows deep, and the sound of passing cars muffles any furtive whispers exchanged. The bookshop, though full of people, feels oddly isolated, each section an island. A hidden door in the back leads to a secret room, perhaps to discuss details too sensitive to be handled in public. The act of waiting for the next message, the next assignment, the crucial communication that will determine the next steps in a covert operation, is often filled with nervous anticipation. In a world where time is never on your side, every second spent waiting feels like an eternity. The silence of the store creates a false sense of safety. Every sound feels amplified, the soft rustle of papers, the distant hum of traffic outside, the ticking of a clock on the wall. Your heart skips a beat. The moment you've been waiting for brings with it a new tension. What now? It's a delicate balancer game where the difference between life and death, between success and failure, rests in the hands of those who understand the power of the message and the stakes of what it contains. The contents of the message could unlock a series of operations, or it could lead to your exposure. It's a world of high stakes, where even the smallest misstep could have catastrophic consequences. And yet, despite the constant pressure, the spy must remain focused and precise. Every move is deliberate, every action calculated. The letter may be delivered by a contact you trust, or it could be left in a place you've both agreed upon. But in the time it takes for that letter to reach you, the weight of its contents hangs over you, and the uncertainty gnaws at you. Is this the moment your cover is blown? Will this message signal the end of your mission, or will it propel you further into the unknown? You pick it up, but the voice on the other end is calm, measured, as though the life or death stakes of the mission don't matter. The message, when it arrives, is never as simple as it seems. Even the most mundane instruction could have a profound impact. But the spy knows that even the smallest details matter, and every exchange is a potential moment of betrayal or success. Yet, to you, they define everything. The message you receive could shift the course of history or lead to disaster. Every detail, every word spoken over the phone, every secret code used in a message, is dissected in your mind, weighed against the risk of exposure. You're expecting a message, and with each passing minute, the anticipation grows. The message could come at any time via an encrypted letter, a phone call, or a secret rendezvous. You know that whatever it is, it could change everything. It could be the key that unlocks the next phase of the mission, or it could expose you, unraveling everything you've worked for. But inside, you know that every word you say could be overheard, and every pause could be a sign of betrayal. There, an agent might pass a sealed envelope or a hidden device, all while ensuring that no one else sees, no one else hears. Every movement is planned with the utmost care. No one can know that something as crucial as the fate of nations is passing between two hands. There, in plain sight, two agents might sit, their bodies turned slightly away from each other, as if they're merely two strangers sharing an afternoon. But the gentle rustle of a newspaper or the quick exchange of a glance might signal the transfer of a vital message. The chill in the air becomes the signal to stand and walk away, disappearing into the crowd. In the blink of an eye, a spy's life could change. The pressure of decoding a critical message in a few minutes, knowing that every second counts, adds another layer of tension to an already perilous world. Such items are the everyday tools of a spy's trade, seemingly harmless, yet capable of being transformed into powerful instruments of survival. But for you, it's a safe house, a place where a hidden message waits. A spy might leave a cafe or walk away from a bench without a second glance. But beneath that casual exit lies an exchange that could shape the outcome of a mission, or even a war. A small compartment has been cut into the center of the pages, just large enough to conceal a folded note or a piece of This secret compartment, invisible to anyone who might casually glance at the book, is your lifeline. It is where vital information is passed, often without anyone even noticing. Ordinary objects are transformed into vehicles for hidden messages, and the most mundane objects become vital instruments for those who deal in deception and subterfuge. The tools of espionage are clever, ingenious, and designed with one simple goal in mind. Yet, the real message is hidden in the code, a series of numbers, letters, or symbols that only those with the key can decipher. These coded messages could be sent in the most innocuous ways, slipped into the seams of a coat, hidden in the folds of a newspaper, or sewn into the lining of a bag. Picture yourself sitting at a small, dimly lit desk, a hollowed-out book in front of you. Nearby, there's a pen resting on the table. It's designed simple but clever. A spy might also carry a coded message, often printed in small, precise script on a piece of paper so ordinary it could pass unnoticed. In moments of extreme urgency, decoding becomes a race against time. The locations where spies meet and exchange information are never simple or open. Hidden meeting places are as varied as they are clandestine. Alternatively, a back alley could serve as the perfect hiding place for a covert meeting. Then, there's the more unconventional meeting places. A bookstore in the middle of a crowded city, a seemingly ordinary place where an agent might meet a contact behind a shelf of books. These locations are not just chosen for their secrecy, but for their ability to disguise the importance of the meeting. Perhaps one of the most emotionally charged moments in the life of a spy is the waiting. You sit in a quiet room, your fingers tapping rhythmically against the desk. When the phone rings, the sound of it is almost deafening. Even if you're waiting for a physical letter to arrive, one sealed and hidden in a compartment of a seemingly mundane object, your mind races. Waiting becomes a mental game, a game of patience and anxiety, where every second feels stretched, distorted by the pressure of what's at stake. As the message arrives, whether through an encrypted letter or a whispered word, you are finally released from the tight grip of anticipation. But there's no relief. The world of espionage is not just about secrecy, but about understanding the weight of what each message, each piece of information, carries. Imagine stepping out into the streets, the familiar sights and sounds of the city unfolding before you, yet you're never at ease. Every corner feels like a potential trap, every passing person an unknown threat. Your senses are heightened. The click of footsteps behind you is never just the sound of a passerby. You feel each footfall reverberates in your mind as a warning, a signal that you are being followed. You find yourself glancing at reflections in windows, catching glimpses of your own face and wondering if it looks too tense, too rigid. Is it possible that you're giving yourself away? The fear of being discovered is a constant companion. What if the person you're talking to is a double agent, or worse, an enemy informant? One slip, one tiny mistake could expose you. It might be a misremembered name, a wrong date, or a slight misstep in a coded message. The feeling of dread grows with every passing second. In your head, you begin to replay every word you've spoken, every action you've taken. Could it be that you've made a mistake? Did someone notice? The simple act of shaking hands, greeting someone with a friendly smile, could be your undoing. Every touch, every word feels loaded with risk. It's not always a rational fear, it's an instinct, a deep-seated anxiety that whispers to you that everyone around you is a potential threat. Even those who seem the most harmless could be agents of the enemy, ready to expose your carefully protected secrets. Is that stranger across the street watching you too closely? Is that glance from a colleague genuine, or does it hold something more dangerous? The carefully constructed life you've built there, false names, the lies, the disguises are all on the verge of collapsing. Every decision, every action, every word you've spoken now feels like it's been scrutinized, and the consequences of this one slip may unravel everything. You practice walking naturally, smiling when you must, engaging in conversations that are polite but carefully neutral. You might walk through a busy street, your thoughts constantly shifting between your task and the growing unease. The shadows seem deeper, the alleyways darker. You know that every corner could be hiding someone waiting to reveal your identity. You feel the weight of eyes on you, even when no one is watching. The mental strain of living like this wears you down, filling you with a sense of paranoia that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. But beneath it all, you know it's all a performance. Every glance, every interaction is calculated. It might be a single mistake or misstep in a conversation, a slip of the tongue, or the inadvertent revelation of an identity you've worked so hard to conceal. But it's more than just the mistake. It's the fear that, in that moment, the entirety of your existence as a spy has been exposed. You remember it now, the subtle change in the conversation, the way the other person's expression shifted. You begin to distrust every person you meet, even those you've known for years. You've lived on the edge for so long, always one step away from being unmasked, and now the danger is real. The tension in your chest grows unbearable, knowing that one mistake could be your last. The seemingly innocuous exchanges now carry hidden weight. Could they be testing you? Could they be fishing for information, trying to catch you in a mistake? Every word feels like a potential betrayal, and the slightest misstep could be your downfall. The quiet whispers in your mind, the fear that your carefully woven lie might have been noticed, become louder. You think back to that interaction, replaying it over and over, and with each repetition, the anxiety tightens its grip on your chest. How could you have missed it? Did you say something wrong? The feeling of dread grows, pressing down on you like a heavy weight. Could this be the moment when your carefully built cover starts to crack? Could someone have picked up on the smallest slip that you didn't even notice? You slow your pace, glance sideways, but see nothing suspicious. Yet the unease doesn't fade. The paranoia lingers, creeping deeper into your mind, gnawing at you like a silent threat. A simple mistake, like a misplaced word or a wrong detail in your cover story, suddenly feels like the spark that could ignite the entire operation. And with it, your entire existence as a spy could be exposed. The life of a spy is not just about gathering intelligence or decoding messages, it's about survival. And survival hinges on one thing: secrecy. The moment your cover begins to slip, the consequences could be devastating. For a spy, every street corner, every face in the crowd could be a potential enemy. Everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. As you speak with a colleague, you can almost feel their eyes on you more intensely than usual. Is it your imagination, or do they suspect something? A glance lingers a little too long. A pause in conversation feels a little too heavy. A simple change in the tone of their voice seems somehow off. The world you've worked so hard to blend into is suddenly an unpredictable place, and everyone feels like a potential adversary. As you move through the world, you become hyper-aware of everything. Is someone trailing you? Or is it your mind, constantly on edge, imagining the worst? Every second, the tension builds. You cross the street, deliberately changing direction, but the nagging feeling follows you. Someone is still there. Someone is always watching. Every time you turn your head, there's the subtle awareness that you might be under observation. And in these moments of interaction, the subtle fear of being exposed is overwhelming. The mere act of exchanging pleasantries becomes fraught with risk. The true terror of a spy's life lies in the fear that at any moment, everything could unravel. The unfamiliarity of a name, perhaps a detail you shouldn't have mentioned in passing, suddenly feels like a glaring error. The walls begin to feel like they're closing in. Every small interaction becomes laden with consequences. As you move through the day, the anxiety becomes a constant hum, never quite leaving you. The feeling of being watched becomes inescapable. As the day wears on, the sense of being followed grows stronger. In the final moments, when you realize your cover has been compromised, the feeling of exposure is overwhelming. You can feel the cold sweat on your brow, the tightening of your chest as the realization settles in. This is it. As the dread consumes you, you realize just how fragile your life has been all along. World War II was not just a war of tanks and soldiers, it was a war of information, a conflict fought not only on the battlefield, but in the shadows, where spies waged a covert war to disrupt the enemy's plans, gain critical intelligence, and turn the tide of history in ways unseen by the public eye. Espionage in World War II was vital to military strategies on both sides. For the Allies, cracking the Enigma code, their cipher used by Nazi Germany. The Enigma machine was considered unbreakable by the Germans, and their encrypted communications seemed impenetrable. It was gathered from human agents embedded behind enemy lines, from resistance networks operating in occupied Europe, and from daring sabotage missions. When you live in a world where your very existence depends on your ability to remain hidden, failure doesn't just mean the loss of an operation, it could mean the death of countless innocent people. They weren't just working to protect abstract ideals or distant generals, they were working to protect their friends, their families, their countries, and their own lives. Each message they sent, each piece of intelligence they gathered, wasn't just another task to tick off. Whether they were operating in occupied Europe or infiltrating enemy military ranks, they knew that one misstep could lead to exposure. A single mistake doesn't just end a mission. It can destroy entire operations and cause unimaginable harm. A spy's work is filled with moments of high-tension moments, when a decision must be made in seconds, when the wrong choice could alter the course of history. Their lives are hidden behind false identities, their victories known only to a select few. It was about something much more personal. The quiet, unseen effort to tip the balance of the war in favor of those who could not fight openly. It was about the sacrifice, the constant pressure, and the knowledge that, in this shadow war, everything was on the line. Failure was not just an option, it was an existential risk, one that would cost lives and could reshape the course of history. And even then, they cannot forget the personal toll of their work. The responsibility to protect the lives of others, to keep the mission alive at any cost, is a burden that few can truly understand. The cost of espionage isn't just measured in the intelligence gathered, it's measured in the lives affected, the relationships destroyed, and the psychological toll of living in constant danger. The intelligence that spies gather doesn't just guide military operations, it can directly affect the lives of soldiers on the front lines, the safety of cities, the stability of governments. Spies didn't just live in constant fear of arrest or torture. They lived with the knowledge that their failure would have ramifications far beyond themselves. For them, espionage is not an adventure. It's a constant reminder that failure means more than personal loss. It could mean the death of thousands, the failure of an entire campaign, or the unraveling of a critical strategic advantage. A missed meeting, a wrongly timed word, or a misplaced glance could lead to the death of innocent civilians, the exposure of secret plans, and the end of a war effort. The weight of that responsibility shaped everything they did. It was a lifeline. The personal weight of responsibility was always present, like a heavy stone pressing down on their chest. Every decision, from which contact to trust to which message to send, was a potential life or death choice. Failure could mean the exposure of entire networks of spies, leading to the capture and execution of agents who had worked tirelessly in the shadows. Despite having a prosthetic leg, she infiltrated Nazi-occupied France and orchestrated sabotage operations that delayed German troop movements. Her mission was not just to gather information, it was to keep entire resistance networks alive, to protect the lives of those who relied on her for survival. The fear of being exposed, the terror of a single slip-up leading to a catastrophic loss, was never far from her mind. Yet, Despite the immense pressure she faced, she continued to operate with precision, knowing that failure could mean the end of a vital operation or worse, the death of those she worked to protect. The stakes were always high, and the pressure to succeed was unimaginable. In places like Vichy France, spies played a pivotal role in passing vital information to the Allies, often at great personal risk. These underground networks disrupted the enemy's logistics, sabotaged their supply chains, and helped to weaken the Axis powers from within. A single piece of intelligence report on the location of a key enemy convoy or the position of a high-ranking officer could send entire strategies into disarray, shifting the balance of power in ways that were impossible to predict. Yet, at Bletchley Park, a team of brilliant minds, including Alan Turing, worked tirelessly to crack the Enigma code, turning a seemingly insurmountable obstacle into a powerful tool for the Allied forces. It was the unseen hand that shaped battles, altered decisions, and ultimately contributed to the downfall of oppressive regimes. Spies were not merely they were critical players in a high-stakes game, working to extract intelligence about enemy positions, military strategies, and weaknesses. Every intercepted transmission, every decoded message, every carefully placed informant was a potential key to victory. The Allied forces relied on spies to gather intelligence from occupied territories, infiltrate enemy lines, and disrupt enemy operations in real time. These revelations didn't just provide a tactical advantage, they changed the course of the war. Thanks to the efforts of spies and cryptographers, the Allies were able to anticipate enemy movements and deploy forces with unprecedented precision, often gaining vital advantages in battles that otherwise could have been disastrous. The information they provided allowed military commanders to plan and execute some of the most important campaigns in history, including the D-Day invasion and the Battle of Midway. The role of signal intelligence and code-breaking cannot be overstated in this context. Each deciphered message could reveal crucial information: the location of German U, the movement of tanks across Europe, or the strength of enemy air. But intelligence didn't only come from decoding messages. But for spies, espionage was never just about gathering information, it was about life and death. Every mission they undertook carried immense personal risk. For a spy, the stakes were often personal. Imagine the intense mental burden carried by those like Virginia Hall, an American spy who worked with the British Special Operations Executive and later the Office of Strategic Services. For spies, the fear of discovery was a constant companion. In the world of espionage, the personal stakes are never just theoretical. This responsibility weighs heavily on the hearts of those who serve as spies. Every spy knows that their role is not one of glory or recognition, but one of sacrifice. In the end, the work of the spy was never about fame or fortune. World War II, though defined by massive battles and sweeping military maneuvers, was also a war fought in the shadows, beyond the front lines, amidst the clamor of bombs and gunfire. A silent war was being waged, one that relied not on soldiers or tanks, but on spies and intelligence. Espionage wasn't simply a byproduct of the war, it was a strategic tool, used by both the Axis and Allied powers, that determined the success or failure of campaigns, battles, and entire fronts. Espionage, often viewed as an auxiliary activity or a mere afterthought in many conflicts, was in fact a central pillar of the Allied war effort. The D-Day invasion, for instance, was preceded by weeks of espionage and deception, including the planting of false information to mislead the Germans about the invasion's true location. For the Allies, intelligence was the edge that allowed them to launch offensives and take actions that would otherwise have been impossible. Imagine, for a moment, the immense impact of a well-timed intelligence report that reveals the enemy's movements, their strategies, or the location of hidden military assets. In a world where military strategy often depended on surprise, intelligence allowed the Allies to strike with precision, catching the Axis powers off guard, and turning the tide in critical battles. It was the contributions of specific individual spies, like Alan Turing and Virginia Hall, that elevated it to an art form and allowed it to have a direct, tangible impact on the outcome of the war. His work cracking the Enigma cipher and developing the bomb machine was not just an intellectual victory, it was a strategic turning point in the war. Hall's role in the resistance is often overshadowed by more famous figures, yet her contributions were pivotal. Spies were not only the eyes and ears of their countries, but they were also the architects of military operations. They infiltrated enemy lines, blended into foreign societies, and operated under constant threat of discovery. Failure was not just a personal defeat. It was a catastrophic event that could cost thousands of lives. It was a central force in determining the outcome of the war. And without the brilliant minds of spies like Turing Hall and others, the outcome of history could have been drastically different. The weight of this responsibility was immeasurable, but the successes were often invisible. The work of a spy was almost never publicly celebrated, yet their actions had more influence on the course of World War II than many of the battles that are remembered in history books. Through their actions, they influenced the way wars were fought, shaping strategies that were based not just on brute force, but on intelligence, deception, and secrecy. These individuals were not simply gathering intelligence, they were changing the tide of history itself. She worked tirelessly behind enemy lines, organizing resistance efforts, and providing the Allies with crucial intelligence about German movements and plans. Despite her prosthetic leg and the immense physical and psychological toll of her work, Hall's bravery and intelligence helped tip the scales in favor of the Allies. Her story is a reminder that individual spies, regardless of their fame or lack thereof, played a crucial role in the Allied victory. Turing's ability to decrypt German military communications provided the Allies with critical information that directly contributed to victories in battles like the Battle of the Atlantic. His efforts saved countless lives, shortened the war, and ultimately led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. Yet, despite his critical importance, Turing's contributions were not fully recognized until long after the war had ended, highlighting how spies like him often remained unsung heroes of history. Without the work of spies, critical operations like the Allied invasion of Normandy or the interception of Japan's plans in the Pacific might not have happened. Similarly, the Allied victory at Midway was largely attributed to the efforts of intelligence officers who cracked Japan's naval codes, revealing the Japanese fleet's intentions before they could strike, and providing military leaders with crucial intelligence that would tip the balance of war. Their actions went far beyond simply gathering information. They shaped strategies, undermined enemy operations, and in some cases, even prevented catastrophes. These spies didn't just observe from a distance. They were active participants, driving the war forward with their deceptive brilliance and intelligence networks. The double-cross system, used by the British during World War II, is a prime example of how espionage went beyond gathering information. British intelligence, working with double agents, fed misleading information to the Nazis, creating a false impression of the Allies' strategic intentions. This deception helped ensure the success of D-Day by convincing German forces that the invasion would occur at a different location, giving the Allies a significant advantage when they eventually landed in Normandy. Without the covert operations, the intelligence gathering, and the spies working tirelessly in the background, the outcome of the war might have been entirely different. At the heart of espionage in World War II were individuals whose actions shaped the course of military strategies, disrupted enemy operations, and ultimately altered the fate of nations. Spies were not just informants or couriers passing secret documents, they were vile operatives, embedded within enemy territories, decoding encrypted messages. One of the most significant ways that spies influenced the war was through intelligence gathering. They infiltrated enemy ranks, acquired sensitive documents, and intercepted coded communications. The Enigma code, used by Nazi Germany, is a prime example of how spies provided vital military intelligence that helped the Allies anticipate and counter enemy moves. But intelligence wasn't always about decoding messages, it was also about disruption. Spies helped to disrupt supply lines, sabotage infrastructure, and sow confusion among enemy forces, all without ever firing a shot. The role of spies wasn't confined to behind-the-scenes work either. They played a pivotal role in major military operations. Espionage, far from being a mere supplement to military operations, was an indispensable tool for military planners. What makes espionage so powerful is its stealth, and its ability to alter the course of the war, the enemy even realizing what's happening. Spies also had the ability to manipulate perceptions, deceive the enemy, and feed them false information to create confusion. As essential as espionage was to the war effort, Alan Turing, a quiet genius, epitomizes the immense contribution of individual intelligence work. On the other side of the espionage spectrum, there was Virginia Hoare, an American spy who infiltrated Nazi-occupied France and worked with the British Special Operations Executive. Espionage in World War II was not just about gathering information, it was a battlefield in its own right. In this secret war, spies worked across borders, in cities, hidden under the cover of darkness, passing intelligence through coded messages and dead drops. By introducing figures like Alan Turing and Virginia Hall, we see that espionage was not just a footnote in the war, it was a decisive element of military strategy, one that shaped history in ways that are often unseen. As we continue to explore the stories of these figures and the pivotal role they played, it becomes clear that espionage during World War II was far more than just side work. Alan Turing, one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, was born in 1912 in London. From an early age, Turing showed an exceptional aptitude for mathematics and logic, but he was also known for being withdrawn, socially awkward, and often misunderstood by his peers. His unique approach to problem-solving was grounded in logic and abstraction, and it was here that Turing began to lay the groundwork for his later revolutionary work in the field of cryptography. After his time at Cambridge, he went on to Princeton University, where he completed his PhD and continued developing his ideas. It was at this stage that Turing's interests began to align with the growing interest in computing and machine intelligence at Bletchley Park. The codebreakers faced the challenge of decoding messages encrypted by a machine that had been designed to be completely secure. The Enigma machine used a system of rotating rotors that scrambled letters in an incredibly complex way. Each day, the machine's settings were changed, ensuring that the cipher was constantly evolving. With 150 quintillion possible combinations, breaking the code seemed impossible. With his bomb machine successfully breaking the Enigma encryption, the Allies gained the ability to intercept and understand key Nazi communications and prevent disastrous attacks, saving thousands of lives and maintaining the critical flow of supplies across the Atlantic. The intelligence gained from breaking Enigma was a game changer, allowing the Allies to anticipate German moves and gain the upper hand in numerous key battles. The information that Turing and his team provided allowed the Allies to strike with precision, and the successful decoding of Enigma is often credited with shortening the war and saving countless lives. One of the most crucial applications of this intelligence was in the Battle of the Atlantic, where German U-boats had been sinking vital supply ships, threatening to strangle the supply lines that were essential for Britain's survival. Rather than being celebrated as the war hero he truly was, Turing was subjected to chemical castration, a treatment that left him physically and mentally scarred. His genius helped to shorten the war, saving countless lives and ultimately contributing to the defeat of Nazi Germany. His work in cryptography and computing laid the foundation for much of the technology that powers our world today. Turing's impact, although delayed, continues to resonate in fields as diverse as computer science, artificial intelligence, and cryptography. Yet, during his lifetime, Turing was not only denied the recognition he deserved, but was punished for his identity. His brilliance and perseverance in the face of adversity not only shortened the war but also helped shape the future of technology and intelligence. His life, marked by both intellectual triumph and personal tragedy, serves as a reminder of how the greatest minds often suffer in silence, only to be truly appreciated long after their time. His story serves as a tragic reminder of the deep injustices faced by those who were forced to hide their true selves. Even when their contributions had a profound impact on the world, the emotional toll of this inhumane punishment, combined with the isolation he felt from his peers, led to Turing's tragic death by cyanide poisoning in 1954. Although his death was ruled a suicide, the full extent of Turing's suffering and the brutal treatment he faced after the war were not fully understood until much later. In the aftermath of the war, Turing's role in breaking the Enigma code remained a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. The public was unaware of the scope of his work, and Turing's contribution to the war effort was overshadowed by his personal struggles, and he became fascinated by the idea of building a machine that could solve problems just as humans do. Turing believed that, if the right approach was found, it was possible to decipher the messages and uncover the hidden intelligence of the Nazis. By understanding German troop movements, the Allies were able to deceive the Nazis into believing that the invasion would take place at a different location, ultimately ensuring the success of the operation. The impact of this intelligence breakthrough cannot be overstated. S work directly contributed to turning the tide of the war. The constant whir of machinery filled the air as teams of codebreakers worked on their assigned sections of the puzzle. The walls of the codebreaking center were lined with papers and charts, the air thick with the smell of ink and freshly printed papers. The sound of keys clicking on typewriters and the soft hum of machines was a constant backdrop, marking the relentless pace at which Turing and his colleagues worked. Despite the mounting pressure and the scale of the task, Turing remained methodical, his sharp mind dissecting the patterns and structures of the Enigma codes. as if they were a puzzle waiting to be solved. His breakthrough came when he developed the concept of the bomber machine that could automate the process of testing potential Enigma settings, drastically speeding up the decoding process. This fascination with machines and algorithms would later shape his most groundbreaking work. His intellectual brilliance was undeniable, but his social isolation and eccentric personality often made him seem like an outsider, even in his academic circles. The bomb helped to reduce the time needed to decipher messages from weeks to hours, significantly speeding up the process of intercepting and decoding vital enemy communications. It was the first of its kind, and its invention proved to be a turning point in the war. For the first time, the Allies were able to read the encrypted messages that had been sent between Hitler and his generals, giving them unprecedented insight into the strategies of the Nazi regime. It was here that Turing's intellectual gifts would be tested to their limits. His eccentricities, often dismissed by others, were not only a sign of his genius, but also his personal struggles. As he worked tirelessly on cracking the Enigma code, Turing remained largely isolated, spending long hours in a small room surrounded by the soft hum of machines, his thoughts racing through complex problems that no one else could understand. While the team around him worked together, Turing's mind was far removed, focused only on his singular goal. He was tasked with breaking the Enigma code, a German encryption machine that was thought to be unbreakable, and that protected vital Nazi military communications. At the time, the Allies were desperate for a breakthrough, and Turing's quiet, methodical genius made him an essential part of the team, even though his personality often set him apart. Turing's curiosity and drive, however, made him an unparalleled force in the world of mathematics and computing. Turing's academic journey began at King's College, Cambridge, where he was recognized as a mathematical prodigy. When World War II erupted, Turing was recruited to work at Bletchley Park, Britain's top-secret government code-breaking center. Turing's life at Bletchley Park was one of solitude, with few understanding the immense psychological and intellectual burden he bore. The task of breaking the Enigma code was nothing short of monumental. However, Turing saw something that others didn't: the mathematical patterns in the cipher. The atmosphere at Bletchley Park during these early days of code-breaking was one of quiet intensity. The bomb machine was revolutionary. Turing's design used electrical circuits to simulate and test multiple Enigma settings at once, rapidly cutting down the number of possible solutions. Turing's work in cracking the Enigma code had a profound impact on the course of World War II. By decoding the German communications, the Allies were able to track the U-boat movements. But Turing's impact didn't stop there. The intelligence obtained through Enigma decryption also played a pivotal role in the planning and execution of the D-Day invasion. Without Turing's code-breaking efforts, the Allies would have been blind to Nazi plans, making it nearly impossible to anticipate their strategies or effectively counter their movements. Despite his immense contributions, Alan Turing's story is also marked by tragedy. Turing was arrested in 1952 for gross indecency due to his homosexuality, which was criminalized in Britain at the time. Turing's story is a painful contrast to the recognition he should have received. Despite the hardships he faced, Turing's legacy as the father of modern computing and the unsung hero of World War II is finally being recognized. Alan Turing's work, while largely done in isolation and obscurity, ultimately changed the course of history. Virginia Hall was, in many ways, an unlikely spy. Born in Baltimore, Maryland, in 1906, Hall came from a privileged background, with an education that included time at prestigious schools in the US and Europe. Before the war, she had already seen her share of adventure, traveling through Turkey and other parts of Europe, where she worked for the State Department. However, her path to espionage was not predetermined by her background. It was shaped by a combination of personal resilience, serendipity, and an unyielding sense of duty in the face of fascism. Her decision to become involved in intelligence work came after the outbreak of World War II. As the war unfolded across Europe, Hull felt compelled to do something significant to help in the fight against Nazi Germany. For most people, this would have marked the end of any hopes of an active, physically demanding life. But for Virginia Hall, it was only the beginning. The loss of her leg did not define her. Instead, it became a testament to her resilience and determination. Nazi patrols filled the streets, and any sign of resistance could result in violent reprisals. Yet, Hall moved through the shadows, setting up her resistance network and spreading intelligence that would prove critical to the Allied forces. With her prosthetic leg, she found ways to move undetected, often relying on disguises and quick thinking to stay one step ahead of the Germans. As the war progressed, Her intelligence and resistance efforts became more and more critical to the Allied military strategy. Her ability to infiltrate enemy territory, gather valuable intelligence, and coordinate sabotage operations had a direct impact on several key moments in the war, particularly in the lead-up to The German ability to move troops and supplies around France was essential to their control of the region, and her unflagging courage made her one of the most successful spies in the history of World War II. Despite operating in one of the most dangerous and oppressive environments, Hull's influence extended far beyond the underground operations in which she was involved. She played a key role in disrupting the Nazi regime, and her actions ultimately contributed to the collapse of Nazi power in France. Her courage, resourcefulness, and resilience in the face of incredible odds played a vital role in shaping the world we live in today. The sacrifices of these individuals, who worked in the shadows and carried out their missions in absolute secrecy, were a cornerstone of the Allied victory. Her legacy, finally coming into the light, ensures that the bravery of these unsung heroes will be remembered, their stories preserved for future generations. Virginia Hall's invisibility in history is a reminder that, often, the true heroes are those who act quietly, away from the public eye, and whose stories are only revealed years later. Though history may have overlooked her, Virginia Hall's legacy as one of the most impactful spies of World War II is now firmly established. Hall's network targeted these vulnerable points, slowing down German reinforcements and disrupting key supply routes, which delayed the Nazi response and allowed the Allies to gain momentum during the D-Day invasion. Her work contributed to the success of the landings, and her actions directly aided in the eventual liberation of France from Nazi control. Hall's ability to transform ordinary situations into secretive opportunities for sabotage was one of her greatest strengths. Hall didn't allow the loss to hold her back. Instead, she adapted. Her bravery and sacrifice were never publicly acknowledged until many years after the war. The secrecy of her work, combined with the fact that she operated in a shadowy world of espionage, meant that much of her role in the Allied victory was hidden from the public eye. After the war, she continued her career in intelligence, working for the CIA, but her legacy as one of the most important female spies of World War II was largely overlooked. These men, stranded in enemy territory after their planes were shot down, relied on the resistance to get them to safety. Her bravery in the face of danger, her ability to build and lead a network of resistance fighters, and her unyielding commitment to the Allied cause are finally being celebrated. Today, Virginia Hall stands as a symbol of the unsung heroes whose work and sacrifice helped shape the outcome of the war. The risk was constant. Every day could bring discovery, and Hall lived under the constant threat of capture. Yet, she carried on, using every opportunity to strike at the Nazi regime. The resistance operations Hall directed were varied and dangerous. She orchestrated acts of sabotage on German transportation systems, disrupted communication lines, and passed along crucial intelligence about Nazi troop movements. Hall set up safe houses, developed escape routes, and coordinated with local resistance groups to ensure these pilots made it back to the Allied lines. Her efforts helped to save the lives of countless soldiers, and her network became a vital part of the larger Allied espionage effort in France. The resistance groups she organized helped to disrupt Nazi supply chains, weakening German forces and making it harder for them to respond effectively to Allied operations. As the war neared its climax, Hall's information helped to shape Allied decision-making, contributing directly to the success of the Normandy invasion and the eventual liberation of France, and used it to her advantage, refusing to be limited by what others might have seen as a disability. But it was just her desire to contribute that made Hall stand out. It was the obstacles she would face and overcome in the process. In 1939, while working in Europe, Hall suffered a terrible accident that resulted in the amputation of her left leg. Despite her prosthetic leg, Hall became an incredibly valuable asset to the Special Operations Executive, a British agency tasked with carrying out covert operations behind enemy lines. Her unique experiences and resilience made her the ideal candidate to become a spy in Nazi-occupied France. She had the right combination of intelligence, fearlessness, and resourcefulness qualities that made her a formidable operative despite her physical limitations. Virginia Hall's journey into the world of espionage took her deep into the heart of Nazi-occupied France, where her covert work would become legendary. Upon being recruited by the SOE in 1941, Hall was given the code name Marie and tasked with organizing and coordinating resistance efforts. Her primary role was to establish a network of agents and facilitate sabotaged missions, all while remaining undetected in a country overrun by Nazi forces. At the time, France was under the grip of a brutal occupation. One of her first major achievements was organizing the escape of downed Allied pilots. The courage and creativity Hall demonstrated in her work is remarkable. Hall's contributions to the Allied cause were not just tactical, they were pivotal. Hall's intelligence network provided the Allies with critical information about German defenses, military movements, and the location of key infrastructure. Her involvement in sabotaging the German rail system was particularly successful. Hall's ability to coordinate resistance efforts, her deep understanding of human intelligence, despite her profound impact. Virginia Hall's contribution to World War II remained largely unsung during her lifetime. It is only in recent years that Hall's immense contributions have been properly recognized. Hall's story is a poignant reminder that espionage during World War II was not just about intelligence gathering and sabotage. It was about individuals who risked everything for the greater good. Her story also highlights the countless other hidden heroes, the spies, resistance fighters, and intelligence operatives whose contributions were crucial but never fully recognized. Through Virginia Hall's remarkable story, we glimpse the untold contributions of everyday spies who, against all odds, fought for freedom in the most perilous of times. World War II is often remembered for its epic battles and dramatic military strategies, from the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of the Pacific. However, there was another, equally significant war being waged in the shadows, our war of intelligence. The Nazis, in particular, had a sophisticated military apparatus, and their leaders, including Hitler, constantly implemented strategic moves that were designed to be unpredictable. For example, a breakthrough in military intelligence came from cracking the Enigma code, the sophisticated cipher used by the Germans to encrypt their communications. The Enigma machine was thought to be unbreakable, but thanks to the efforts of brilliant minds, Alan Turing's spies like Virginia Hall worked in the heart of Nazi-occupied France, where she set up clandestine resistance groups that provided invaluable information about the German military's weaknesses. Through sabotage, espionage, and the careful coordination of underground operations, Hall's network crippled Nazi logistical systems, slowed troop movements, and helped prepare for the D-Day invasion, one of the largest military operations in history. The Allies gained the ability to intercept and read encrypted German messages, providing the Allies with insight into German movements, battle plans, and the locations of vital military units. And Virginia Hall were largely unsung and hidden from the public eye, both during and after the war. The information he helped uncover provided critical military intelligence, allowing the Allies to make informed decisions and avoid catastrophic losses. She built a network of agents, helped downed Allied airmen escape, and coordinated sabotage efforts that directly weakened the Nazi regime. But Hall's contributions went largely unrecognized during the war. Operating under the constant threat of discovery, she had to live a double life, concealing her true role and operating in complete secrecy. She was a hidden hero, one of the most effective spies of the war, yet largely forgotten by history until recent years. However, despite his groundbreaking work, Turing's contributions remained top secret during the war, and even after the conflict ended. It is in the shadows, in the quiet moments of intelligence gathering, where wars are won. Their lives, though often unseen, were defined by an unshakable sense of duty and an unbelievable level of courage. And while their names may not have been shouted from the rooftops during the war, their legacy has been rightfully reclaimed, and their silent heroism is now recognized as essential to the victory of the Allies. And the constant pressure they faced to succeed, knowing that failure could cost countless lives, were burdens that few could truly understand. Sometimes, it's measured in the lives of those who work in secrecy, whose contributions, though hidden, are no less critical to the eventual triumph of good over evil. The work of Turing, Hall, and others in the intelligence community was central to the success of the Allied war effort, yet their contributions were often invisible. These unsung heroes fought a different kind of battle, one of secrecy, deception, but the spies who worked tirelessly, often at great personal cost, to ensure that the good guys won. Their silent triumphs, now recognized, continue to shape the way we understand the history of World War II. An intelligence shaping the world in ways that cannot always be measured in terms of physical victories or territorial gains. Their legacies are a testament to the power of silent heroism, reminding us that the most crucial contributions to victory are often made in the shadows, away from the public eye. In a world that often values visibility over subtlety, their stories show the profound importance of those who work quietly behind the scenes. The lives of Turing, Hall, and so many others who operated in the shadows remind us that some of history's greatest heroes are those whose names we will never fully know, and whose sacrifices remain largely unseen. For them, the work was not about fame or recognition. These unsung heroes, whose names we may never fully know, played a crucial role in the war's outcome. Their impact, though invisible during the war itself, cannot be overstated. It was about duty, about contributing to a greater cause even at the expense of their own personal well. Worse still, Turing was criminalized for his sexuality, a tragedy that added a painful layer to his story. For Turing, the intense isolation and social ostracism he faced because of his sexuality were never fully acknowledged during his lifetime. Similarly, Hall's work was conducted in such secrecy that, even after the war, it took years for the world to understand just how instrumental she had been in crippling Nazi operations. Both Turing and Hall, despite their extraordinary impact, were left to face the consequences of their work alone with little recognition or appreciation for the risks they had taken. His contributions were not publicly acknowledged until long after his death, when the full magnitude of his work was finally understood and appreciated. Their actions were vital to the success of the Allies, yet their stories went unrecognized, their sacrifices largely forgotten. However, it is the quiet, unseen work of intelligence officers and spies that sometimes shapes the course of history more profoundly than any battlefield victory. Turing and Hall were not fighting in the trenches. They were not leading armies on the front lines. Yet, their contributions were integral to the ultimate success of the Allied forces and to the defeat of Nazi Germany. One of the most famous operations was Operation Fortitude, a deception campaign that convinced the Germans that the Allied forces would land at far from the actual D-Day landing at Normandy. Using fake radio transmissions, double agents, and dummy equipment, the Allies were able to misdirect German forces, ensuring that the Nazis would keep their heaviest defenses away from the real landing site. To counter this, the Allies needed more than just brute strength. They needed to know what the enemy was planning before they struck. Espionage didn't just change the course of individual battles. It helped to shape the overall strategy and tactical advantage that ultimately led to the defeat of the Axis powers. Espionage, the covert collection and dissemination of intelligence, played an instrumental role in the Allied victory. It wasn't just a side activity. It was an integral part of military strategy, a critical war strategy that often made the difference between success and failure. One of the most notable successes was in the Battle of the Atlantic, where the Allies used this intelligence to avoid devastating attacks by Nazi U-boats on supply convoys. Thanks to Enigma decryption, the Allies were able to route ships away from German submarine positions, preventing the loss of critical supplies and maintaining the flow of resources necessary to sustain the war effort. The Allies, especially Britain and the United States, were acutely aware that they could not simply rely on traditional warfare to defeat the Axis powers. Spies, cryptographers, and intelligence officers provided the vital information that shaped military campaigns. This decryption of Enigma messages was it allowed the Allies to anticipate German movements and strategize accordingly. But intelligence was not just about reading the enemy's message. It was also about infiltrating enemy territory, building underground networks, and gathering human intelligence. Espionage was also essential to deception. The Allies did not only gather intelligence, they used it to mislead the enemy. These deceptive tactics, alongside the crucial intelligence provided by spies, laid the foundation for many of the Allied victories during the war. Despite the monumental impact of espionage on the war's outcome, the contributions of spies like Alan Turing, his brilliance in breaking the Enigma code not only shortened the war but also saved millions of lives. Virginia Hall's story follows a similar path. Her work as a spy in Nazi-occupied France was nothing short of heroic. The sacrifices made by these individuals were immense. The emotional cost of their secrecy, the loneliness of their isolated lives, their personal sacrifices were often not visible to the world. As we reflect on the immense contributions of spies like Alan Turing and Virginia Hall, we are reminded of the silent sacrifices made by countless other espionage agents throughout World War II. We live in a world where history often elevates those who are visible: the generals, the soldiers, the leaders who made public decisions. Their stories, which were once buried beneath layers of secrecy, now serve as a reminder that sometimes the most critical work in a war is done out of sight. In many ways, their stories show that the true cost of war isn't always measured in casualties or bombs dropped. The legacy of espionage during World War II is one of hidden courage and selfless sacrifice. It is only with the benefit of hindsight that we can begin to understand the true magnitude of their actions. As we reflect on these extraordinary individuals, we should also remember that many of the greatest heroes of World War II were not just the soldiers who stormed the beaches, but as incredible as the stories of figures like Alan Turing and Virginia Hall, there is an entire hidden world of espionage, vast and shadowy, that remains largely unknown, even now. These are the countless missions lost to history, the covert operations that unfolded in secrecy, and the untold contributions made by agents whose names we may never know. The espionage efforts we've discussed were pivotal, yes, but they represent just the tip of the iceberg. There are still secrets, hidden deep within the fabric of history, that continue to captivate historians and military strategists alike. As we reflect on the monumental contributions of Turing and Hall, it is important to remember that their stories are far from the only ones that shaped the course of the war. Many critical, covert operations missions that played a decisive role in securing victory are still shrouded in mystery, their details only partially known, and in some cases, lost entirely. And what has remained buried in the vaults of history for so many years, the shadows of war still hold secrets that we are only just beginning to uncover. This next segment will take us into the heart of these covert operations, exploring the mysteries that still leave historians with unanswered questions, and the secret missions that continue to intrigue, puzzle, and inspire. These are the operations that did not make the history books, the ones that were concealed under layers of secrecy for decades, and whose significance may still be underappreciated by the public at large. Imagine the spies whose lives were defined by deception, those who worked deep within enemy lines, living under assumed identities, and carrying out operations so secretive that their true impact will never be fully understood, and untold stories that have remained locked in the shadows of history. The covert missions we'll explore were not only unknown to the public at the time, but many have remained obscure even in modern historical accounts. These are the missions where the lines between reality and deception were so blurred that even those involved may never have fully understood the true impact of their actions. Secret agents whose names may never be revealed, whose sacrifices went unrecognized, and whose work was buried under the weight of wartime confidentiality. We've only just scratched the surface of this intricate web of intelligence work that spanned continents. Now, as we move into the next chapter of this journey, we'll uncover some of these hidden narratives, the espionage mysteries. What remains hidden in the fabric of wartime espionage, which unsung heroes altered the course of the war through their secret work. Let us step into the unknown and delve deeper into the unsolved espionage puzzles that could have changed everything, if only the world had known. While we've already examined the monumental contributions of spies like Alan Turing and Virginia Hall, the world of wartime espionage is much broader and deeper than their individual stories suggest. Behind the known heroes and well-documented operations, there lies a vast, complex network of covert missions, many of which remain locked away, their full impact concealed by layers of secrecy and the passage of time. Some of these missions were so carefully executed that even the agents involved could only piece together fragments of a much larger puzzle. Many operations were so intricately designed that they didn't just aim to gather facts. They were about planting false truths that would cause missteps and delays within enemy commands. This type of manipulation, where the success of the mission depended on making the enemy believe they were achieving victory, while the Allies were already laying the groundwork for defeat, was one of the most powerful tools in the espionage arsenal. The success of D-Day wasn't only due to the bravery of soldiers storming the beaches, strategic deception, and the ability to manipulate enemy expectations. Without this covert operation, the Normandy landings could have been much more costly, and the Allied advance through Europe would have been significantly delayed. Others were so highly classified that entire networks of agents worked in isolation, contributing to an operation without ever fully understanding its broader goals or how their efforts would ultimately fit into the grand strategy. The psychological warfare aspect of espionage often extended beyond military intelligence and into the realm of manipulation, making the enemy believe they were winning or that they had control, when in fact they were already losing ground. Spies often worked without knowing the full picture. Their roles were just small pieces of a much larger strategy. And agents whose names we'll never know, and whose operations will never be fully understood. The war's covert intelligence efforts were so wide-ranging that many operations remain classified to this day. Some operations were so complex and multi-layered that even the people who took part in them didn't understand their full scope. It wasn't uncommon for agents to spend years in the field, working without the certainty of success. From the double-cross system to Operation the Allies used espionage to ensure that the enemy was always a step behind, never able to catch up with the true intentions of the Allies. The covert operations that remain lost to history are a testament to the unseen heroism and the invisible victories that were won in the shadows, shaping the course of the war in ways that will never be fully understood, and always with the knowledge that failure could mean the end of their mission or worse, their life. We examine how these covert efforts influenced the decision-making at the highest levels, and how espionage reshaped the social fabric of the world as political elite. In this operation, several captured German agents were turned into double agents, working for the Allies while still reporting to their Nazi handlers. These agents fed the Germans false information, misdirecting the enemy and giving the Allies the opportunity to prepare for major offensives. Some of these efforts were undertaken by agents working in occupied Europe, deciphering radio transmissions and decoding messages. But many of the results of these operations are still classified. For example, the famous Operation Mincemeat, where a dead body was planted with false documents, led the Nazis to believe that the Allies would invade Greece instead of Sicily. For many of them, their work was a personal sacrifice, often leading to years of isolation and loneliness. Even when the missions succeeded, the individuals involved often went back to their quiet lives, never to be publicly acknowledged for their immense contributions to the war effort. For instance, espionage networks in places like Eastern Europe, North Africa, and Asia played critical roles in undermining the Axis powers, but often remained cloaked in mystery. These networks were often tasked with tasks like disrupting supply lines, disrupting Axis intelligence operations, and gathering support from local populations, but the specifics of their actions are still shrouded in secrecy. The deception worked so well that when the Allies landed in Sicily, the Germans were completely unprepared, leading to a crucial victory in the Mediterranean. Wartime espionage wasn't simply about gathering intelligence, it was about orchestrating elaborate webs of deception, sowing confusion within enemy ranks, and creating an environment of uncertainty. The art of deception was a central pillar of espionage during World War II, as much of the intelligence war wasn't simply about intercepting messages or infiltrating enemy lines. It was about manipulating the perceptions of the enemy. By planting the seeds of false beliefs, the Allies were able to manipulate the German command, forcing them to waste valuable resources and troops on non-existent threats, while the true invasions occurred elsewhere. The psychological toll this took on the Nazis, constantly shifting their resources to cover phantom threat, was one of the unseen effects of espionage. They engineered misinformation, sending the enemy down false paths, while carefully concealing the true objectives of the Allied forces. One of the most fascinating aspects of espionage operations during World War II was the psychological complexity involved. Take, for example, the role of deception in Operation Fortitude, the Allied deception strategy leading up to the D-Day landings. The real invasion of Normandy was preceded by a false invasion designed to convince the Germans that the main assault would come at Pas-de-Calais, a much closer point to England. Through a mixture of fake radio transmissions, dummy tanks, and fake corps movements, the Allies created a convincing illusion of a large-scale invasion force preparing to land in Calais. German forces, including high-ranking officers, were convinced that Normandy was a diversion, and Pas-de-Calais was where the true battle would unfold. This carefully constructed web of lies and deception diverted vital German forces away from Normandy, and when the real invasion came on June 6, 1944, German defenses were much weaker than they would have been otherwise. The success of many covert operations relied on more than just gathering information. It was about disrupting the enemy's plans before they even had a chance to execute them. Consider the double agents working under the double-cross system, an elaborate deception campaign run by British intelligence. What's often overlooked is how these deceptions weren't just about misleading the enemy, they were about control. These covert operations often took years to plan and execute, requiring an incredible level of coordination and trust among agents. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the unseen world of espionage is that there are still untold stories missions, for example. While we know about the Bletchley Park effort and the breaking of the Enigma code, there were countless other interceptions and decryptions of Nazi communications that remain largely Similarly, there are espionage missions that were never fully recognized after the war, because they were too dangerous, too successful, or too sensitive. The human cost of these covert operations was staggering. Many agents worked with little to no recognition, carrying out incredibly dangerous tasks without ever being able to discuss their achievements. As we step deeper into the world of wartime, we begin to see that it wasn't just about gathering information, it was about creating an entire web of deception, manipulating perceptions, and making the enemy misstep at every turn. Espionage, especially in World War II, was a game of deception, a high-stakes mental battle fought in the shadows. And while we know some of the stories of Turin, Hall, and others, there are still so many untold missions and hidden agents whose work was just as essential to the war effort. In the next segment, we'll explore how espionage affected the social elite and the military leaders who depended on it. One of the most extraordinary and successful covert operations of World War II was the double-cross system, a masterful display of intelligence, manipulation, and deception that played a pivotal role in securing Allied victory. The double-cross system is not just a tale of it is a story of how a well-crafted web of misinformation could change the entire course of history. At the heart of the operation was John Masterman, a British intelligence officer and the architect behind the double-cross system. His goal was deceptively simple: to convince the Nazi regime that the Allies were planning to launch their invasion of Western Europe not at Normandy, as was the actual plan, but to also feed misinformation back to the Nazis with such precision and consistency that they believed it to be true. Many of these double agents were captured German spies, who had been turned by the British intelligence services and were coerced or persuaded to work for the Allies. Others were local agents recruited by the Allies, who had already been operating within enemy lines, building up the trust of their German handlers. The double agents played a crucial role in reinforcing the illusion of a forthcoming invasion at Calais. Each agent had to maintain their cover while simultaneously sabotaging the enemy's efforts, ensuring that their actions wouldn't raise suspicion. Without the double-cross system, the Germans would have been much more prepared for the Normandy landings. These agents were not only instrumental in turning the tide of war, but they also risked their lives every single day. Many of them were never publicly acknowledged for their work, and their bravery often remained a silent contribution to the war effort. Only in recent years has the full scale of their influence been revealed, and even then, the details of their work are still not fully understood by the public. It also helped create a narrative of victory, one that kept the Allies united in their determination to see the war through. The double-cross system, while largely unknown at the time, became a vital part of the psychological strategy that helped ensure the success of the Allied invasion and ultimately the defeat of the Axis powers. Their actions remind us that espionage, while often invisible, is one of the most powerful forces in war. It can shift the tides of history without a single shot being fired, proving that sometimes the most profound victories are won in the shadows. The Nazis would have been able to fortify the region with their most elite troops, turning D-Day into a bloody and near impossible endeavor. The success of the war effort was also defined by those who operated in the shadows, whose deceptive actions reshaped the enemy's expectations and altered the course of the conflict. The double-cross system serves as one of the most incredible examples of how intelligence and deception could change the tide of history. Some were even recruited into post-war intelligence services, though their wartime efforts remained a secret for many years. Even after the success of the Normandy landings, the Germans continued to place undue focus on the Pas-de-Calais region, making them believe that the Allied forces would try another landing there. This ongoing deception allowed the Allies to keep the Germans guessing, making it easier for the Allied forces to advance across France, liberating towns and cities without facing the full force of German retaliation. They did not receive the hero's welcome afforded to those in more visible roles, but their contributions were equally as important to the eventual victory over the Axis powers. The Allies knew that success depended not just on military might, but on deceptive intelligence that would undermine German efforts before the first shot was even fired. For many, it was a game of life and death, as they had to constantly convince their Nazi handlers that they were genuine, while providing crucial false information to the British. If they faltered, the Allied cause could be compromised, and their own lives would be forfeit. They provided a constant flow of misleading intelligence, including fake radio transmissions, fabricated documents, and deliberately leaked military movements. For example, agents like Juan Pujol Garcia, known as Gar, became pivotal players in creating the illusion of a large-scale invasion force preparing to land at Pot. Despite being a fictional creation, Garbo successfully fed the Nazis an entire web of false intelligence, convincing them that the Allies were preparing an invasion force of over 150,000 men ready to strike at Calais. In reality, there was no such invasion force. This was purely a smokescreen, fabricated to keep the Germans off balance. These carefully orchestrated efforts ensured that the Nazis would divert their resources and troops to Calais, leaving Normandy exposed and vulnerable when the real invasion began on June 6, 1944. Many agents had to operate in such secrecy that even their families couldn't know the true nature of their work. Some agents were forced to keep up the ruse of being loyal Nazi spies, even while secretly feeding false information that would ultimately weaken the Nazi regime. This tension was a constant source of anxiety, and for many agents, the fear of being unmasked was always looming over them. Through a series of well-coordinated deceptions, the Allies were able to convince the Germans that the main Allied invasion would take place at Podoc, a location much closer to England and thus much easier to defend. In reality, the true landing site was Normandy, where the German defenses were considerably weaker. The double-cross system depended on the strategic use of double agents, individuals who appeared to be working for the enemy, but were secretly working for the Allies, feeding them false information to sow confusion and mislead the Nazis. These agents didn't just collect intelligence. They were tasked with deliberately deceiving their Nazi handlers, and their success was instrumental in the success of D-Day and the Allied liberation of France. The brilliance of the double-cross system lay in its ability to not only gather intelligence from German spies. The Nazis had no reason to doubt the information coming from their agents, especially when it was consistent and well supported by fabricated reports that corroborated the false story. The agents who played a role in the double-cross system were living on the edge, constantly walking the tightrope between betrayal and survival. The stakes for these individuals were immense. One mistake, one inconsistency, could lead to their exposure and result in death for them and anyone associated with them. These double agents were also integral to the larger deception effort. The danger for these agents was not just from the enemy, it was also from their own side. While the success of D-Day is often attributed to the bravery of soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy, it's important to remember the pivotal role of intelligence and deception in making that victory possible. The double agents who played their parts in the double-cross system were ultimately unsung heroes, their contributions hidden behind the secrecy of wartime operations. Many of the double agents lived out their lives after the war in obscurity. The double-cross system wasn't just confined to D. It was a long-term operation that continued to affect the war efforts well after the invasion. What's even more remarkable is how this psychological warfare went beyond mere military deception. As we explore the vast and often hidden world of wartime, it becomes clear that success in World War II wasn't determined by just military might or strategic battles. The double agents, their lives woven into a network of lies, worked tirelessly to mislead the Nazi regime, ultimately helping to secure the victory that would change the world. One of the most compelling and enigmatic stories of World War II, Espionage, centers around an individual who, for many years, has been known only as the traitor. This figure, whose true identity remains cloaked in mystery, is believed to have played a crucial role in sabotaging the Allied invasion plans during the most pivotal moments of the war. Instead, this person was someone embedded deep within the ranks of the British government, someone who used their position to betray vital intelligence about the Allied plans for D-Day and mislead the Germans. The enigma surrounding this individual raises an uncomfortable question. Was this betrayal part of a larger, more deeply embedded Nazi network, or was it the work of a rogue, double agent gone astray, feeding them false information about the location and timing of the impending invasion? This individual, known only as the traitor, is suspected of feeding critical false intelligence to the Germans, thereby amplifying the belief that the Pas-de-Calais region was the real landing point. The traitor was apparently working against them, deliberately feeding the Nazis misleading data that contributed to their overestimation of the threat in the Pas-de-Calais region. The result of this betrayal could have been disastrous if the Germans had been better prepared in Normandy, or if the Allies had not been able to maintain the cover of their deception with even greater ingenuity. The success of D-Day hinged on keeping the Germans unaware of the real landing site. The Allies had cleverly orchestrated a massive deception to convince the Germans that the invasion would take place at Pas-de-Calais. This notion is particularly disturbing because it suggests that the betrayal may have originated from an unexpected source, someone within the very heart of the British war effort. The fact that the betrayal remains unsolved has led some to believe that the true identity of the traitor was intentionally obscured after the war, either to protect Allied intelligence efforts or to prevent the tarnishing of reputations in the post-war world. Historians continue to debate whether the betrayal truly altered the course of the invasion, or if it was merely an isolated incident within a much larger and more complex espionage network. This risk of betrayal is something that every spy and agent in the field had to contend with daily. The very nature of double-crossing, where agents could be playing both sides, meant that the line between friend and foe was often difficult to discern. The psychological toll of this constant tension played into the very fabric of espionage operations, as trust became something that could not be easily given or received. If this were the case, this individual could have been placed within the British ranks by Nazi intelligence, as a spy embedded within the very heart of the Allied operations. It shows that even in the most carefully orchestrated operations, the threat of betrayal looms large, whether from enemy agents or, more troubling still, from within the ranks of the trusted. The enemy at the gates is always a concern. But in the world of wartime intelligence, the greatest threat can often come from those working in the shadows alongside you, trusted with secrets and pivotal roles. It remains an enigma part of World War II espionage that continues to raise more questions than it answers, where nothing is ever quite what it seems, the greatest. Betrayals often come from those you least expect, and sometimes even the most meticulously laid plans can be threatened by an unseen force lurking within. Was this betrayal part of a larger Nazi plan to sabotage the D-Day invasion, or was it the selfish act of a disillusioned agent who wanted to alter the course of history for personal reasons? In many ways, this mystery encapsulates the very nature of espionage itself, deceptive, unpredictable, and full of layers that may never be fully unraveled. The very nature of espionage requires that trust be placed in people, who are often operating under false identities and within highly secretive structures. From this vantage point, they would have had direct access to top-secret plans, and could have used their position to undermine the D-Day invasion. Various theories abound about the person's identity, and each theory offers a different explanation for the betrayal that nearly shook the Allied war effort to its core. The fears of internal betrayal were not hypothetical, they were very real, and they added a layer of complexity to their intelligence operations. Throughout the war, the Allies worked under constant suspicion of potential infiltration by Nazi agents, which led them to develop layers of counterintelligence strategies to protect the secrecy of their plans. This deception involved a complex web of double agents, fake radio transmissions, and a fleet of dummy tanks and decoy operations, designed to mislead the German forces and divert them away from the true landing site. Perhaps this individual believed they could gain personal power or prestige by sabotaging the dire plan. Or perhaps they were manipulated by the Nazis into betraying the Allies. This version of events paints a picture of greed or self-interest gone awry, where the agent, in their attempt to play both sides, ultimately undermine their own cause. The ultimate goal of this act of espionage was to cripple the success of the Normandy landings, which would play a crucial role in the liberation of Western Europe and the eventual defeat of the Axis powers. The betrayal, which unfolded in the critical days leading up to D, has long been the subject of speculation, intrigue, and debate among historians, intelligence officers, and military strategists alike. The traitor wasn't an ordinary double agent working under direct enemy orders. However, the betrayal was not about simply leaking critical data. The enemy in ways that could potentially doom the operation from within. The D-Day invasion, codenamed Operation Overlord, was one of the most meticulously planned and logistically challenging military operations in history. But in the midst of this elaborate deception there emerged a shadowy figure, believed by some to have been in a position of significant influence within the British intelligence ranks, who might have infiltrated and undermined the Allies' plans, while the vast majority of double agents in the double-cross system were working in the Allies' favor. What makes the mystery of the traitor so captivating is that, despite years of research and historical investigation, the individual responsible for this betrayal has never been definitively identified. Some historians suggest that the traitor could have been a German sympathizer, perhaps even a Nazi infiltrator within the British intelligence community. Others, however, speculate that the traitor was likely a double agent who had initially been recruited to spy on the Nazis, but over time grew disillusioned with their assignment or the war itself. Another theory is that the betrayal came from within the ranks of the British government, where a person with access to sensitive intelligence leaked information to the Germans, either out of personal gain, ideological alignment with Nazi ideology, or because they were under direct pressure from Nazi operatives. Despite the many theories, no conclusive evidence has ever emerged to identify this figure. What makes the betrayal of the traitor so unsettling is the reminder it provides that espionage isn't just about me, it's also about the threat within. For the Allies, this meant that even within their own ranks, there was a risk that some could turn against them. The possibility of a turncoat within the British government, or among the Allied ranks, was an ongoing concern for both military and intelligence agencies. Though we may never know the identity of the traitor, their story serves as a reminder of the complexities of espionage, the delicate balance between loyalty and deception. The mystery of the traitor has never been fully solved, and perhaps it never will be. Even if the true identity of the traitor is never revealed, the impact of their actions serves as a powerful reminder that in the world of while much of World War II's espionage history is dominated by the dramatic stories of spies in Europe, WWII agents, codebreakers and operatives infiltrating enemy ranks, Pacific theater also witnessed its own distinct form of intelligence warfare, a quiet and critical battle fought in the shadows. The breaking of the Japanese naval code, one of the most vital and successful espionage operations in this theater, remained a silent victory that decisively shifted the balance of power in the Pacific. Yet, despite its profound impact, the individuals behind these efforts were largely unsung, their names unknown to the broader public for years. Here cryptanalysts worked tirelessly to decode Japanese communications and interpret the information into intelligence that could be acted upon. The extent of their impact wasn't widely recognized until much later, when the full story of their contributions became public in the post-war years, but also in terms of how wars would be fought in the future. Signals, intelligence, the ability to intercept and decrypt enemy communications became a key element of modern warfare, with lessons learned in the Pacific influencing subsequent intelligence operations in conflicts that followed. Over the course of the war, the decoding of Japanese messages provided crucial intelligence in multiple naval engagements, helping the Allies to strategically counter the Japanese fleet at critical junctures. The ability to read Japanese operational plans, knowing when and where attacks would occur, gave the US Navy the tactical advantage it needed to push back Japanese forces and gain momentum in the Pacific. The work done by these cryptographers remains one of the most underappreciated stories of World War II, espionage, a story of silent dedication, where the battle wasn't fought with guns or bombs, but with pencil and paper, deciphering the complex patterns of enemy communications. This code, thought to be unbreakable, was ultimately cracked by the relentless efforts of a group of codebreakers working in complete secrecy. These unsung heroes, who worked in isolation, were often unaware of the strategic significance of their efforts until after the war, when the secrets of their work were The battle of intelligence in the Pacific may not have involved dramatic showdowns or battlefield bloodshed, but it was no less pivotal. Breaking the Japanese naval code didn't just help secure a critical victory at Midway, it redefined the landscape of modern warfare and demonstrated the power of intelligence as a force multiplier. Their hard work laid the foundation for the intelligence network that would guide the Pacific campaign through several crucial turning points. The intelligence methods and techniques they pioneered would form the foundation for military intelligence for years to come, influencing future espionage and cryptographic efforts in Cold War conflicts and beyond. It's not just about tanks, planes, and soldiers, it's about the ability to decode the enemy's secrets, to anticipate their moves, and to strike when they least expect it. The story of these silent heroes remains one of the most underappreciated and undervalued chapters of World War II. Their dedication, their silence, and their incredible contribution to the Allied victory in the Pacific War will forever remain as one of the great untold stories of the war, a hidden legacy of brilliance and sacrifice in the shadows. The importance of cryptographic work during World War II meant that the government kept the identities of those involved in code-breaking efforts carefully guarded, ensuring that they would remain protected from any potential retaliation by the Axis powers. Even as the Allies celebrated their victory, the true scope of the codebreakers' work remained hidden from public view for many years. Station Hypo, alongside other intelligence units, played an indispensable role in the success of many military operations by intercepting and translating Japanese messages in real time. Their work, particularly in breaking the Japanese codes, was a cornerstone of modern intelligence. Yet, despite their critical role in the war, many of the cryptographers, including the women who worked in the shadows of the Pacific, remain relatively unknown to the broader public. Their names are not etched in the history books, and their stories have often been overshadowed by more tangible military victories. Their work was pivotal in deciphering key messages that led to Allied victories, especially the Battle of Midway in 1942. The Japanese had prepared to ambush the United States Navy at Midway, but the United States was able to predict their attack, thanks to the efforts of but also to take a counterattack that decimated the Japanese fleet. The Japanese had planned to lure the US Navy into a trap by feigning a vulnerable position, but the decrypted messages allowed the Allies to turn the tables and ambush the Japanese fleet first. This success was directly attributed to the intelligence gained from breaking the Japanese naval code, marking one of the most significant turning points in the Pacific War. This intelligence allowed the US Navy to ambush the Japanese fleet, ultimately leading to the loss of 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and turning the tide of the war. During World War II, the United States and its allies engaged in a high-stakes battle of intelligence and deception in the Pacific. Unlike the larger publicized campaigns of military might, one of the most important fronts in the Pacific War was the cryptographic battle of war fought not on the beaches or in the air. The ability to intercept and decode Japanese messages provided the Allies with unprecedented insight into the movements and strategies of the Japanese fleet. This intelligence allowed the United States to gain the upper hand in key battles, such as the Battle of Midway, which turned the tide of the Pacific War in favor of the Allies. But behind the scenes, with a handful of dedicated codebreakers working tirelessly to unravel the secret messages of the Japanese military, these individuals, many of whom were women or military cryptographers, worked for months, and sometimes years, to crack codes that the Japanese believed to be unbreakable. They were stationed in remote, isolated locations, sometimes without even knowing whether their work would lead to any tangible result. Despite the monumental nature of their efforts, the vast majority of these codebreakers worked in obscurity, never seeing the full impact of their work. In particular, the breaking of the Japanese naval code, known as JN-25, was one of the most decisive moments in the Pacific conflict. The efforts of the cryptographers who broke the Japanese codes were carried out in near-total secrecy. One of the most famous success stories from the Pacific's cryptographic efforts came from the work done at Station Hypo in Hawaii. Yet, despite the critical nature of their work, these codebreakers were often unseen heroes, their achievements buried under the weight of wartime secrecy. The contributions of the codebreakers were so profound that they changed the course of the war, not just in terms of military tactics during Midway. The codebreakers' efforts allowed the United States to not only anticipate the location and timing of the Japanese attack, but it wasn't just the Battle of Midway. What's remarkable about these operations is that they were based on a single, significant breakthrough, the breaking of the JN-25 code. While the military triumphs achieved through these breakthroughs were celebrated publicly, the codebreakers behind them remained largely invisible, their contributions unnoticed and unacknowledged during and after the war. Much of the secretive nature of their work was a result of wartime security protocols. It wasn't until the 1970s and beyond, when the declassification process began, that the full extent of these individuals' contributions was revealed to the public. The legacy of the codebreakers in the Pacific is one of silent heroism, whose contributions were essential in winning the war, yet whose achievements went largely unacknowledged until well after the fact. For those who toiled away in near-complete obscurity, their work did not end with the defeat of the Axis powers. Despite their anonymity, the work of these Pacific codebreakers is a reminder of how essential intelligence is to warfare. As we peel back the layers of World War II, espionage uncovering unsolved mysteries, betrayals, and covert operations, we come to understand the hidden, often unacknowledged contributions that so many spies and agents made to the Allied victory. Many of the most pivotal moments in the war were determined not by the clash of weapons, but by the work of cryptographers, double agents, intelligence officers. They lived in a world where they couldn't speak openly about their achievements, even as their work proved vital to the success of the Allied forces. It's about the deceptive strategies that the Allies used to mislead and manipulate their enemies. While some missions, like the famous Operation Fortitude, which misled the Germans about the site of the D-Day invasion, were widely recognized, many others were kept under wraps. The success of these operations may have been immediate, but their consequences remained buried for years. For every well-known success, there are countless more untold stories, unsung missions, deceptive schemes, and operations that never made it to the public eye. How many German spies were recruited and used to feed the Nazis false information, just as the British and Americans were using misinformation to shape the Germans' understanding of Allied strategy? How many operations were hushed up due to their sensitive nature or because the agents involved had to be protected from retaliation long after the war was over? The Allies needed to create the illusion that the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, not at Normandy. This constant misleading created a profound sense of doubt and confusion that the Allies used to their advantage, allowing them to push through even the most heavily fortified German positions. The deception was achieved through a variety of methods, including the use of dummy armies' fake radio transmissions, and even the deployment of a dead body, complete with false documents that misled the Germans into thinking the Allied forces were planning an attack at another location. While the exploits of battlefield commanders, military leaders, and iconic figures like Winston Churchill and Dwight D. Eisenhower are well documented, they were isolated from the rest of the military, working in small, secretive units, and often unable to share the burdens they carried. While their successes had profound effects on the war's outcome, their stories went untold for years, overshadowed by the more visible military campaigns. The intelligence officers, codebreakers, and spies who shaped the course of history remain largely unknown to the wider public. The illusion worked, and the German forces remained entrenched in Pas-de-Calais, while the real attack happened at Normandy, achieving the element of surprise and untold stories that played key roles in shaping the war's outcome. How did these key figures use intelligence in their and what role did secrecy and covert operations play in shaping the war's strategic goals? Stay with us as we uncover the intricate interplay between espionage and the political elites, an essential part of this hidden world. The intelligence battle was as essential to the defeat of the Axis powers as the more visible military campaigns. And as we uncover these secrets, we are reminded that sometimes the greatest victories are won in the shadows by those who worked silently to alter the course of history. These individuals, often women and military, worked in total secrecy and received little recognition for their essential role in the war. They were as vital to the success of the Pacific Campaign as the soldiers in the field, yet their contributions were largely hidden, not coming to light until after the war had ended. Some of these missions were successful beyond measure, others were failures, and some remain shrouded in secrecy to this day. Each one adds another piece to the puzzle, revealing the hidden side of the war that was as critical as the visible battles fought on the front lines. These stories remain locked away in the vaults of history, waiting to be discovered, examined, and understood. Hull was deeply isolated during her time in Europe, constantly in fear of discovery. Despite the massive contribution she made to the war effort, her name remained largely unknown for many years after the war. It wasn't until much later that the true extent of her work was acknowledged, and crafting a narrative of success that often existed more in the minds of the enemy than in reality. For instance, when the Japanese fleet prepared for an assault on Midway Island, the American codebreakers had already cracked their naval codes. This allowed the US Navy to intercept and predict the Japanese movements, ultimately ambushing and decimating the fleet. While the military engaged in a fierce battle at Midway, the cryptographers who had broken the code did so in silence, their success uncelebrated and largely unrecognized. One of the greatest espionage triumphs of the war was the art of deception, a strategy that misled the enemy into believing they were winning, while the Allies were actually laying the groundwork for a final victory. The Allied strategy of deception became one of the most powerful weapons in the war, one that turned the tide in critical battles such as D-Day and Midway, by manipulating not just the enemy's movements, but also their understanding of the war's course. There were instances where agents who had played major roles in strategic operations were never fully acknowledged by their governments. These individuals were not celebrated, but instead left to live out their lives, with their contributions fading into the backdrop of history. Many of these stories, if they are ever told, have been buried under the weight of wartime secrecy or simply forgotten. The betrayals committed by inside agents or double agents who misled their own side may be lost forever. Even decades after the war, some records remain sealed or heavily redacted, leaving many to speculate about the full extent of espionage operations that took place in the shadows of World War II. As historians continue to unearth them, we see how spies, codebreakers, and double agents contributed to the defeat of fascism through subterfuge, deception, and intelligence tools of war, just as powerful as any bomb or bullet. And covert operatives who gathered critical information, misled enemies, and created the complex web of deception that kept the Nazis and the Japanese on edge. But much of this invisible warfare remains unknown to most of the world. These agents were the hidden heroes, whose contributions were either buried by time, classified documents, or political agendas, and whose legacies are only now being These individuals worked in the shadows, risking everything for a cause that would not always offer them recognition. Yet, their actions shaped the war in ways so profound that, without their silent victories, the outcome might have been entirely different. World War II was as much a battle of intelligence as it was a physical war fought with armies, planes, and tanks. Throughout the war, these secret agents operated with an incredible level of secrecy, often not knowing whether their intelligence would even reach the right people, let alone make a difference. The mystery of World War II espionage is not just about gathering intelligence. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these secret missions is that many of the most crucial operations were carried out in complete isolation, often with agents working alone or in small teams. For example, how many more double agents played pivotal roles in the misdirection of German resources. In this world of subterfuge, even the most highly classified operations often left more questions than answers. Some of these unsolved espionage puzzles might never be fully answered. Espionage during World War II wasn't just about gathering secrets. It was about creating a web of deception, manipulating enemy perceptions. Take, for example, Operation Bodyguard, which was a key part of the larger Operation Fortitude deception campaign. The success of this operation didn't just depend on fake military movements. It was about creating a psychological environment of uncertainty, in which the Germans could never be sure of where the attack would come. Similarly, the Japanese code-breaking efforts in the Pacific War were not just about intercepting enemy messages, but about using that intelligence to craft an entire strategy of deception. Espionage during World War II wasn't just about collecting intelligence. It was about crafting perception, managing uncertainty, and leading the enemy down paths of false conclusions. One of the most striking aspects of World War II espionage is the silence surrounding many of its true heroes. These unsung heroes worked tirelessly in near-complete isolation, often having no idea of how their work was contributing to the larger war effort. Perhaps the most poignant example of this is the story of Virginia Hall, the American spy who played a key role in the French resistance and was instrumental in organizing sabotage missions and intelligence operations. Even more staggering is the story of the cryptographers in the Pacific, who were responsible for decoding Japanese messages and providing critical intelligence that led to the victory at Midway. The world of World War II espionage is vast, and the number of untold stories is staggering. As we continue our journey through the mysteries of espionage, we will uncover more forgotten heroes, unsung missions. In our next segment, we will shift our focus to how espionage influenced the social elite and the leaders at the highest levels of power. As we've seen in previous segments, espionage during World War II was not merely a clandestine series of operations carried out by spies operating in the shadows. It was far more than secretive encounters in dark alleyways or disguised offices hidden behind a veil of silence. Espionage was woven into the very fabric of the decisions that shaped the war and, by extension, the world order. Behind every military operation, every diplomatic maneuver, there was the hidden influence of intelligence, the silent power that guided decisions and altered the course of history. At the very core of this invisible war were the social elite and political leaders, whose involvement in espionage went far beyond typical wartime roles. He played a central role in using espionage as part of a wider political strategy that was essential to Britain's survival. MI6, the British intelligence service, was not just a tool for gathering military intelligence. It was also instrumental in building public morale, orchestrating propaganda campaigns, and ensuring the loyalty of allied nations. During times of crisis, leaders like Churchill used the secrecy and mystique of espionage to shape the narrative, to demonstrate that the Allied forces were not only fighting on the battlefield, but also waging a war of intelligence and covert operations. His mistrust of the information provided by the Abwehr, the German intelligence service, led him to make decisions that weakened the German war effort. There was constant infighting among various factions within the Nazi Party, each vying for control over espionage efforts. This lack of effective control within the Third Reich's espionage network made them vulnerable to Allied intelligence operations, many of which relied on misinformation, counterintelligence, and sabotage to mislead the Germans and misdirect their resources. The lack of cohesive leadership ultimately led to inconsistent intelligence gathering, which played a part in the Allied successes. For example, during the invasion of Normandy, Hitler's overconfidence in his spies and the false information they provided allowed the Allies to strike with surprise. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin used their intelligence networks to manage the complex web of alliance, ensuring that information was shared strategically to strengthen their collective position. At the same time, they manipulated the flow of intelligence to keep their respective domestic populations aligned with the war effort, to suppress any dissent, and to create a unified front against the Axis powers. This helped galvanize public support for the war effort, ensuring that the citizens of Britain stayed behind their leaders, even as the war grew increasingly difficult. No longer just a tool for military advantage, espionage became a key component of diplomatic strategy. The CIA in the United States and the KGB in the Soviet Union emerged as powerful forces, using espionage to gain global influence. It wasn't only about the military victories that we see on the front lines. It was about how those victories were made possible through the carefully cultivated web of information, and how the flow of that information was used to manipulate, coerce, and control the future of the nations involved. manipulate political regimes, and even interfere in foreign elections. Continuation of the covert operations that had started during World War II, bringing to light the immense impact that intelligence had on the world we live in today. Intelligence operations were used to suppress resistance movements, monitor civilians, and ensure that dissent was minimized across the territories controlled by Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. It set the stage for the post-war order, shaping the emerging balance of power in Europe and Asia. Intelligence efforts during the war laid the groundwork for the creation of organizations such as the United Nations and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, both of which relied heavily on the intelligence systems established during the conflict. These organizations would use espionage to maintain global political stability, acting as counterweights to the power of the Soviet Union and ensuring that the world did not return to chaos. Churchill himself was deeply involved in shaping espionage efforts, often relying on information gathered through covert operations to not only guide the British military's response to German aggression, but also to manage international diplomacy. These leaders were not only dependent on intelligence to guide military strategy, but also relied on it to secure their power on the global stage. The decisions made by political leaders based on the information gathered by spies and agents in the field didn't just determine the outcome of military campaigns. They shaped the political and social landscape of the post-war world. Intelligence gathering allowed leaders to assess the strengths and weaknesses of their enemies, forecast military movements, and even shape the public narrative about the war. The intelligence gathered during the war helped the US position itself as a superpower in the post-war world. Through covert operations, the US was able to gather intelligence on Soviet activities, making it a key player in the Cold War that would follow World War II. The CIA, formed in 19, inherited much of its intelligence strategy from the World War II efforts that involved espionage to manage both military and political agendas. For instance, the Operation Overlord deception campaign, which misled the Germans into believing that the main Allied invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy, was a masterclass in political manipulation. The deception played a crucial role in reaffirming the unity of the Allied forces, providing the Allies with an opportunity to land in Normandy with minimal German resistance. But in many ways, the Nazis' approach to intelligence was more flawed and ineffective. While Hitler and his inner circle heavily relied on espionage networks to monitor enemy movements, their failure to trust the intelligence they gathered and their disjointed leadership ultimately contributed to military defeats. Churchill was deeply invested in ensuring the success of the D-Day landings, and he understood that intelligence, deception, and misinformation were key weapons in achieving victory. As agents in the field worked tirelessly to gather intelligence, that very intelligence was funneled to those at the highest levels of politicians, military commanders, and the elite were using espionage to shape political strategies, manipulate public perception, and even decide the fate of entire nations. In this world of power, espionage was no longer just a tool for gaining secrets, it was a weapon of political warfare, wielded with precision and subtlety. Through intelligence operations, the elite were able to make decisions that not only affected the outcome of the war, but also set the stage for the post-war order. Behind closed doors, in war rooms and executive offices, decisions were made that would dictate the fate of nations, with espionage often providing the crucial edge. The flow of information, both real and manipulated, became as important as the tanks and bombs on the front lines, guiding military operations and influencing the future of geopolitics. For the political elite of World War II, espionage was far more than a way to collect information. It was a tool used to safeguard their political agendas and ensure the survival of their regimes. The military elite were aware that the decisions they made were just guided by battlefield tactics, but also by the intelligence networks that shaped the broader strategic landscape. They understood that information had the power to control the course of war, mislead the enemy, and manipulate the perception of both the enemy and their own citizens. In short, espionage was deeply embedded in the political calculus of the war. Take Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, as an example. Churchill's relationship with intelligence services went beyond military strategy. It was also about building alliances. Espionage also played a role in maintaining the public's trust in the war effort. On the other side of the war, the Nazi elite similarly used espionage to protect their regime and maintain power. Hitler's decision to interfere with military intelligence, critical moments such as in the Battle of Stalingrad, was a stark contrast to the more rational approach taken by the Allies. Moreover, the Nazi elite's obsession with totalitarian control also created an atmosphere of mistrust and paranoia within their own intelligence apparatus. In the realm of intelligence, the Nazis suffered from a weak link there, failure to coordinate their espionage efforts under a single unified strategy. As we step behind the closed doors of the highest echelons of power, we see that espionage was not just about gathering information, it was a weapon used to craft global political strategies. In the case of the United States, espionage was crucial in shaping post-war diplomacy. Espionage was also a critical component of wartime diplomacy. On the Axis side, espionage was used to not only gather military intelligence, but also to maintain political control within occupied territories. The role of espionage extended far beyond the battlefield and the diplomatic corridors of World War II. The wartime intelligence efforts also reshaped the role of espionage in global politics. As we step away from the shadowy world of the elite and their involvement in we realize that intelligence was not just a tool of war, it was a tool of power. In the case of both the Allied and Axis powers, espionage was a reflection of the complexity and subtlety of global politics during World War II. In the next segment, we will continue our journey through the hidden world of espionage, as we uncover more untold stories and forgotten heroes. Espionage during World War II was far more than just a means of gathering secrets. It was an indispensable tool for maintaining and securing political power. For both the Allied and Axis leaders, the ability to manipulate, control, and utilize intelligence networks often determined not only military success, but also political survival. But by their knowledge of enemy movements and intentions, as well as how they managed to control their own side's secrets, their ability to deploy espionage tactics would directly influence their decision-making process, allowing them to make informed decisions about both military action and diplomatic strategy. Espionage became both a defensive and offensive weapon in this power game, one that could ensure the survival of a regime or dismantle it from within. This was a massive deception campaign, designed to mislead the Germans about the location of the Allied invasion of Western Europe. By orchestrating the fortitude deception, he used espionage to manipulate German military strategy, preventing them from preparing properly for the Normandy landings. The deception kept the Germans uncertain and distracted, while Churchill and the Allies continued to march forward, slowly but surely gaining ground. It was a masterstroke of political and military intelligence, a perfect example of how espionage could be wielded as a tool for victory. However, his distrust of the information coming from his intelligence officers and his political influence over military strategy often led to disastrous consequences. He was convinced that the main Allied invasion would come at Podak. Espionage in the hands of the Nazi elite became a tool for reinforcing their power, but not an effective instrument for military strategy. They understood that information was power, not just in terms of military movements, but in terms of political and diplomatic maneuvering. Allied intelligence officers worked to plant fake information about the D-Day invasion, creating the illusion that General Patton's forces would land at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. This elaborate network of double agents, false radio messages, and decoy equipment played a critical role in the success of D. It was a strategic masterpiece that showed how espionage could be used not just for gathering intelligence, but for manipulating military strategy at the highest level. The betrayal of secrets, the use of espionage for political gain, and the formation of global alliances all stemmed from the lessons learned during World War II, where the control of information, as we have seen, was just as vital to winning the war as the physical battles fought on land, sea, and air. Allied leaders used deception, misdirection, and counterintelligence to create disinformation campaigns that misled the Germans, keeping them unbalanced and misleading their command structure. This strategic use of espionage was crucial to the success of the Allied war effort. From Operation Overlord to the defeat of Germany, espionage was a central part of the Allied victory, influencing military tactics, diplomatic alliances, and even public perception of the war. The Nazis' inability to adapt and rely on their intelligence network, coupled with their political infighting, led to a fragmented and ineffective espionage system that ultimately worked to the Allies' advantage. As we know, it set the stage for the Cold War, an era where intelligence was as much about political power as it was about military strategy. The CIA and the KGB, both products of World War II intelligence efforts, would go on to play pivotal roles in shaping global politics in the decades following the war. This false belief was fed by a combination of misinformation and the efforts of double agents planted within the German intelligence ranks. These double agents played a pivotal role in misleading the Germans about the location of the invasion. The successes of the war were, in many ways, orchestrated in the shadows. Decisions, based on information gathered, manipulated, But the larger failure in German intelligence was also a result of Hitler's mistrust of his military commanders and his obsession with personal control. This resulted in misallocation of resources, with critical German defenses remaining thinly spread in Normandy, while the Allies successfully executed their assault. For example, during the Battle of Stalingrad, Hitler ignored the warnings from his intelligence network and insisted on holding out in the city, ultimately costing the German army hundreds of thousands of men and weakening their position in the east, not just in terms of information gathering, but in how that information could shape the broader political landscape of the war. The Germans were led to believe that the Allies would land at Pas-de-Calais, the closest point in France to Britain, rather than at Normandy, where the actual landing would occur. This misdirection played a pivotal role in ensuring the success of as it diverted the attention of the German military, who misallocated their resources, strengthening defenses at Pas-de-Calais, and leaving Normandy vulnerable. Adolf Hitler, unlike Churchill, was notoriously distrustful of intelligence reports, often making decisions based on personal bias and ideological convictions rather than on hard facts. Hitler's decision-making was often heavily influenced by his inner circle, people who fed him information that aligned with their own political goals, rather than presenting him with objective intelligence. By controlling intelligence, leaders could manipulate public opinion, manage military strategy, and even sway international support for their cause. Intelligence, in this context, became as essential to the leaders of nations as tanks, soldiers, or military strategy. The flow of information, how it was controlled, and how it was used to shape perceptions, played a decisive role in steering the course of the war. Churchill was not just a leader of the British government. He was intimately involved in the strategic use of intelligence networks to guide the war effort. Understanding the power of information, Churchill relied on MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, to provide him with the vital intelligence that would shape Britain's wartime decisions. Leaders understood that success on the battlefield could be achieved or destroyed not just by the number of troops for those at the highest levels of power, such as Winston Churchill in Britain or Adolf Hitler in Germany. Espionage was woven into the very fabric of their leadership. Perhaps one of the most striking examples of how espionage was used as a political tool comes from Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. One of the most famous instances of Churchill's use of espionage for political and military gain was Operation Fortitude. Churchill understood that controlling the narrative for the enemy and his own people was a powerful weapon in its own right. Espionage in Churchill's hands was not just about winning a battle. It was about crafting the story of the war, about manipulating perceptions to maintain momentum for the war effort and keeping up morale at home and abroad. In contrast, the Nazi regime relied heavily on espionage, but struggled with major shortcomings that ultimately weakened its war efforts. Hitler's reliance on the Abwehr was extensive, and during the early years of the war, the Nazi intelligence network was able to provide valuable insights into enemy positions and movements. Similarly, during the invasion of Normandy in 1944, Hitler's overconfidence in his intelligence network led him to make critical errors. The imperfection of Nazi intelligence was not just a result of faulty information, but also the personal biases and political motives of those at the top. By contrast, the Allied elite including Churchill, Roosevelt, and Eisenhower used espionage with precision, knowing that the quality of their intelligence was just as important as the military strength they could muster. One of the clearest examples of this is Operation Bodyguard, the largest deception campaign during World War II. Allied leaders were not just gathering intelligence, they were shaping the battlefield through their mastery of intelligence manipulation. Espionage didn't end with the defeat of the Axis powers. The post-war world saw espionage as an essential part of geopolitical influence, with former Allied powers and the Soviet Union continuing the intelligence battles in the years to come. Espionage, for the political elite of World War II, was not just a tool for gathering intelligence, it was a weapon for securing power and controlling outcomes. Espionage during World War II was not simply about gathering information to gain military advantage. It was deeply intertwined with international diplomacy and political strategy. The information gleaned from intelligence operations didn't just guide military tactics or decide the outcome of battles. It played a pivotal role in shaping the political landscape of the war. The project was one of the most closely guarded secrets in history, not just for its immense scientific potential, but because it held the future of global power in its hands. The atomic bomb could change the course of the war, but also, its secrecy could shape the post-war balance of power. Espionage became a powerful tool in the hands of leaders, helping them to navigate complex alliances, manage the flow of information, the scientists working on the project, the military officials managing it, and the political leaders in charge had to carefully balance the security of the project with the need to share certain intelligence with trusted allies. Under the leadership of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the FBI worked tirelessly to identify and neutralize these agents, including few whose actions could have delayed or even sabotaged the development of the atomic bomb. The Americans, however, had their own counterintelligence network to deal with the threat, which operated behind the scenes, intercepting communications and monitoring individuals suspected of espionage. The Soviets, led by Joseph Stalin, were engaged in their own secret race for nuclear weapons. By feeding the Germans false information, Churchill helped create confusion within the German military and buy time for the Allies to make crucial advancements. Espionage became as much about perception management as it was about military strategy. But they also had to keep alliances intact with the Soviets, who were still crucial allies in the fight against the Axis powers. Espionage networks helped to ensure that secrets were kept from falling into the wrong hands. But it was also about building trust with the Soviets and other members of the Allied powers. Stalin used espionage to influence not only military decisions, but also diplomatic conversations between the Allies. As the war concluded, the information collected and the tactics developed during the conflict became foundational to the intelligence strategies of the post-war world. The United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union, each with their own espionage apparatus, to use intelligence as a tool of global power during the Cold War. The use of intelligence for political control continued to evolve, solidifying espionage as a key element of political power in the modern world. He was deeply interested in the post-war order, and espionage became a critical tool in ensuring that the Soviet Union emerged from the war as a superpower, using intelligence to shape both military strategy and political alliances. From the influence of espionage on political decisions to the creation of new global alliances, espionage played a defining role in shaping the political landscape of the 20th century and beyond. From Churchill's use of MI6 to manipulate German defenses and ensure the success of to the Soviets infiltrating the Manhattan Project to ensure their nuclear superiority, espionage was used by the elite as a means of shaping the war's outcome and managing the post-war world. The delicate balance between secrecy, diplomacy, and military strategy that leaders navigated is a testament to the profound role intelligence played in global politics during and after the war. Espionage was crucial not only for military strategy but also for managing the fragile alliances that were formed to defeat the Axis powers. By using espionage to manage information, he ensured that the US, the Soviets, and the British were kept on the same page. The CIA and MI6 became prominent in global intelligence networks, while the KGB of the Soviet Union continued its work, shaping global political movements through espionage and psychological manipulation. These agencies weren't just concerned with gathering military intelligence. They used espionage to shape the political landscape, influence governments, and manipulate the flow of information to suit their needs. At the same time, he was able to maintain a psychological edge over the Germans, feeding them misinformation to keep them off balance and unprepared for the eventual invasion. This balance required constant vigilance, strategic deception, and political maneuvering, with the stakes being nothing less than the balance of global power. In the case of the Manhattan Project, espionage was a double-edged sword. It was used to protect the most valuable military secrets while also preventing the Soviets from obtaining the knowledge necessary to build their own nuclear weapons. Yet, it was also used as a tool for cooperation. The fact that the United States shared much of its scientific progress with Soviet scientists during the war speaks to the political calculus that leaders had to perform, a delicate balance between sharing resources to defeat a common enemy and protecting knowledge that could shift the post-war balance of power. Klaus Fuchs, a German physicist working on the Manhattan Project, was a key Soviet agent who passed critical atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The intelligence provided by MI6, the British intelligence service, was essential in shaping Britain's wartime strategy, but it also served to manipulate public opinion and weaken enemy resolve. Operation Fortitude, for example, was an elaborate deception campaign that made the Germans believe that the Allied invasion of Europe would take place at rather than Normandy. This misinformation, fed to the Germans through double agents and false intelligence, created a false sense of security for the German high command. It led them to focus their defenses on Pas-de-Calais while the Allies were able to strike at Normandy with a much lighter German presence. Churchill used his intelligence network not only to monitor enemy movements, but also to craft strategies that would mislead and confuse the Axis power. maintaining an edge in both military operations and diplomacy. His betrayal helped accelerate the Soviet atomic program, which would eventually lead to the detonation of the first Soviet atomic bomb in 1949, only 4 years after the United States. To avoid falling behind the Allies, the Soviet Union deployed an extensive espionage network aimed at infiltrating key areas of the US war. The Manhattan Project. At the same time, they had to ensure that information about the atomic bomb did not leak to enemy forces, most notably the Soviet Union, who, by the end of the war, was both an ally and a rival in the global power struggle, and manipulate perceptions of both the enemy and their own populations. One of the most striking examples of this delicate balance between espionage and political strategy was the Manhattan Project, an Allied effort to develop the atomic bomb. The stakes surrounding the Manhattan Project were monumental. One of the most critical challenges facing the Allied elite was the Soviet espionage network operating within the United States. Espionage played a critical role in the Soviets' ability to catch up to the Allies in nuclear technology. For the American elite, the existence of Soviet spies within their most vital military project was a grave concern. The task of maintaining secrecy was a delicate one. Political leaders and military officials had to manage the flow of information to protect the Manhattan Project. Churchill, too, understood that espionage was not only a tool for military advantage, but also a psychological weapon in the hands of political leaders. One of the most effective uses of espionage during Churchill's time was the creation of false narratives to mislead the Germans. For Churchill, espionage wasn't just about gathering military intelligence, it was about using deception to control the narrative of the war. Churchill's manipulation of intelligence also played a role in maintaining the unity of the Allied forces. Espionage at its core was a matter of delicate balance, not just between allies and enemies, but also between secrecy and diplomacy. Similarly, during the war, political leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt relied on espionage to ensure that they could negotiate effectively with their allies. The Soviets, on the other hand, played their own game of diplomacy and intelligence. The strategic use of espionage during World War II didn't end with the defeat of the Axis powers. The espionage methods pioneered during World War II laid the groundwork for covert operations in the decades to come. In the Cold War, espionage became the backbone of foreign policy, and the Cold War intelligence operations were heavily influenced by the strategies used during World War II. World War II was not merely a tool for gathering military intelligence, it was a central component of political strategy. As we continue to explore the hidden world of espionage in the next segment, we'll look at how these covert operations influenced the social elite in both the Allied and Axis spheres. Espionage during World War II was not confined to military strategy or political maneuvering at the highest levels of government. It extended far beyond the war rooms of political leaders and the battlegrounds where soldiers fought. Espionage didn't simply function as a military or political tool. It was also a cultural tool, used to manage perceptions and control information. Businessmen, media magnates, and entertainers, many of whom were close allies of government officials and military leaders, played a crucial role in supporting operations and facilitating the flow of intelligence across various sectors of society. Espionage thus influenced not only international strategy but also the internal dynamics of home front societies. In fact, espionage had a profound and far-reaching impact on the social elite, shaping the very fabric of society during the war. Iconic stars like James Stewart and Bette Davis enlisted in military service or worked with the U.S. War Department to produce films that not only boosted morale, but also contributed to the war effort. The financial elite were instrumental in funding various espionage efforts and ensuring that the economic infrastructure of wartime espionage remained intact. They also played a significant role in ensuring that the global flow of capital aligned with the strategic goals of the U.S. government. Films like Casablanca were more than entertainment. They were crafted with subtle messaging to reinforce the ideals of American exceptionalism and to inspire patriotism among audiences. They used intelligence networks, not just to monitor the activities of foreign enemies, but also to suppress dissent and prevent resistance within Germany itself. The Nazi regime's espionage network, though initially powerful, was fractured by internal power struggles. Nazi intelligence suffered from inconsistent leadership, which undermined its ability to make informed decisions. For example, in the case of the D-Day invasion, the German military had intelligence pointing to a potential landing in Normandy, but ignored or misinterpreted that information due to conflicting reports from various intelligence factions. This failure was compounded by Hitler's stubborn refusal to adapt his strategy based on actionable intelligence. Himmler's SS and the Abwehr, the German military intelligence agency, often found themselves in competition, undermining each other's operations. And political maneuvering, albeit in a much more restrained form under the divided control of the Allied powers and the Soviet Union. For the elite class, both in the Allied and Axis powers, espionage provided the means to control information, manipulate public opinion, and ultimately influence the future of global politics. It was a delicate balancer tool for maintaining political power, securing military advantage, and ensuring that each nation's ruling elite could navigate the complexities of wartime strategy with precision. The legacy of Nazi espionage was marked by its failures as much as by its successes, and its aftermath served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of misuse of intelligence in the hands of a totalitarian regime. But their internal inefficiencies and misuse of intelligence made their espionage efforts less effective and ultimately contributed to their defeat. Hitler's refusal to rely on intelligence reports that contradicted his personal beliefs led to disastrous decisions, including the invasion of the Soviet Union and the failure to adapt to the changing tides of the war. It shaped the very social dynamics and global power structures that defined the post-war world, influencing the actions of the elite class in ways that are still felt today. In the next segment, we'll explore how these covert operations and intelligence networks intersected with the daily lives of common citizens during the war, revealing how espionage in all its forms ultimately touched the lives of everyone from the highest generals to the everyday civilians caught in the middle. As a totalitarian regime, the Nazis understood the importance of controlling information, and espionage was a critical tool in ensuring that propaganda maintained the illusion of Nazi strength while silencing any opposition. It had lasting effects on the post-war world, particularly for the elite and political class. In the aftermath of the war, the Allied elite both in Europe and the United States became the architects of a new global order, shaped in part by the intelligence gathered during the conflict. Espionage continued to play a key role in shaping the post-war political landscape, especially as the Cold War began to take shape. Through domestic espionage, the Nazi elite manipulated the German public into believing in the superiority of the Nazi regime, fostering a culture of fear and compliance. The elite class, particularly in countries like the United States and Nazi Germany, were closely tied to espionage networks, using intelligence not only to influence global events, but also to control public perception, morale, and the narrative that would shape the post-war world. Under Adolf Hitler's rule, the Nazi elite relied heavily on espionage not just for military and political advantage, but also to maintain control over the German population. Espionage was used as a means of domestic control, as well as an instrument to keep the Nazi regime tightly wound and loyal to its totalitarian leadership. And MI6, these agencies would continue to shape global politics through espionage and covert operations, influencing decisions made by political elites in the post-war era. The elite class, particularly those in the United States and Soviet Union, continued to use espionage to maintain global power, either through military strategies or by manipulating diplomatic relations with other nations. While political leaders were involved in making critical decisions, it was the wealthy business figures, entertainment moguls, and the media that helped disseminate these decisions and shape public opinion. In doing so, they controlled how the war was viewed not only in the United States, but also in the eyes of the rest of the world, influencing the future power dynamics that would shape the post-war order. Espionage and the American elite, Wall Street, Hollywood, and the media in the United States. Wall Street, Hollywood, and the media were inextricably linked to the war effort and espionage operations. Wealthy business magnates often collaborated with government agencies, either directly or through intermediaries, to ensure that intelligence was properly disseminated and used to shape the future of the country. The media, in particular, was an essential arm in this process. Newspapers and radio broadcasts were not just tools for conveying information, they were also instruments of wartime propaganda. Through censorship and strategic messaging, the American elite helped control the narrative surrounding the war. Information was carefully curated to bolster public morale, ensuring that the war effort remained supported by the civilian population. These influential figures were more than just bystanders in the global conflict. They played an active role in ensuring that the war effort was seen favorably by the American public and international audiences alike. Many American elites contributed to espionage in various capacities, whether by funding covert operations, facilitating the movement of critical information, or ensuring that sensitive intelligence networks remained secure. Take Hollywood, for example, where actors and filmmakers contributed to the creation of war propaganda films that shaped public perception. Even Wall Street had its ties to espionage, with many prominent bankers and businessmen supporting covert operations or financial intelligence work. For the American elite, espionage wasn't just about gathering intelligence. It was about shaping public perception and manipulating the flow of information to ensure national unity and support for the war. In Nazi Germany, espionage was equally crucial, but it functioned within a much darker and more repressive system. The SS and the Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, were responsible for overseeing domestic espionage. At the same time, the Nazis' misuse of intelligence and personal biases led to significant failures in the war. Moreover, the infighting among Nazi officials often led to mismanagement of their espionage effort. In this way, the Nazi elite used espionage to maintain control and reinforce their propaganda machine. Espionage's impact on the elite's post-war legacy. The impact of espionage didn't just end with a military victory in 1945. The intelligence networks established during World War II laid the foundation for future intelligence agencies like the CIA in Germany. After the collapse of the Third Reich, espionage remained a tool for both intelligence gathering. Espionage, as we've seen, was not merely a tool for gathering intelligence, it was a means of shaping the political, military, and social landscape during World War II. As we conclude this segment, it's clear that espionage's role during World War II extended far beyond the battlefield. As we draw to a close in our exploration of the elite's role in espionage during World War II, it becomes abundantly clear that intelligence work was far more than a tactical instrument for military advantage. While espionage played an undeniable role in military operations by providing critical information about enemy movements, war plans, and vulnerabilities, its influence extended well beyond the battlefield. This control over information allowed wartime leaders to craft their own version of events, steer their populations toward particular ideologies, and ensure the success of their larger geopolitical ambitions. Intelligence gathered through espionage was never just a set of facts. It became a tool for shaping reality itself. They knew that espionage wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about manipulating the flow of information to influence public opinion, political decisions, and even enemy strategies. He saw intelligence as a tool to protect Britain's military interests, but also as a way to influence global diplomacy. Churchill's use of intelligence extended beyond traditional military objectives. It was instrumental in shaping Britain's diplomatic relationships, both within the Allied powers and with other nations in Europe. He frequently rejected or ignored military advice and intelligence reports that contradicted his personal beliefs, which ultimately resulted in the misallocation of resources and critical mistakes. The Nazis' failure to effectively utilize espionage became one of the many reasons for their eventual defeat despite their initial successes in intelligence gathering. While the project itself was one of the most secretive undertakings in history, espionage played a critical role in keeping the Soviet Union from acquiring crucial knowledge that could undermine the US monopoly on nuclear weapons after the war. At the same time, the Allies had to navigate their relationship with the Soviets, who were already engaged in espionage to gather information about the atomic program. The post-war world saw the formation of new intelligence agencies, such as the CIA in the United States and the KGB in the Soviet Union. These agencies became the dominant players in the Cold War, an ideological and political conflict where intelligence was the primary weapon, and political infighting left the regime vulnerable not only to military defeat, but to a loss of control over their own populace. Hitler's decisions, often informed by flawed or politically motivated intelligence, accelerated Germany's downfall. The tools, tactics, and strategies developed during World War II continued to inform the operations of modern intelligence agencies, whose influence still resonates today. The mismanagement of espionage within the Nazi regime is often cited as one of the key reasons for its inability to adapt to changing circumstances during the war. We will uncover the social consequences of these covert operations, how ordinary citizens were affected by the hidden intelligence efforts that influenced their daily lives and perceptions of the war. From propaganda to economic manipulation, espionage didn't just change the course of the war. It transformed societies on both sides of the conflict. The CIA used espionage, not only for military operations, but also to influence politics, topple governments, and even affect elections across the globe. Espionage was more than just a means of gathering intelligence. It was a deliberate instrument for controlling the flow of information that could shape the course of nations. It allowed leaders to secure their political futures, manipulate alliances, and project their power onto the world stage. The control of intelligence allowed Churchill to navigate complex international relations and keep Britain's war effort unified under his leadership. This espionage was a significant factor in the Soviets' ability to test their own nuclear bomb. Just a few years after the US dropped the bomb on Japan, it was a hidden weapon used not only to win wars but to reshape the very structure of global politics, ensuring that those with the power to control information could shape the future of nations' economies and alliances for decades to come. Espionage, therefore, wasn't just about military strategy. It was central to the geopolitical chess game that was unfolding on the global stage. Political leaders could use intelligence to mislead enemies, control the narrative on the home front, and even secure post-war political victories. As the war wound down, the balance of power would shift from military might to intelligence dominance, and espionage would continue to be a critical tool in this struggle. The Abwehr and the Gestapo were responsible for monitoring foreign threats and domestic resistance, respectively. Both the United States and the Soviet Union used intelligence to infiltrate economic networks, control trade routes, and even sabotage each other's economic systems through covert operations. In this way, espionage became a multi-dimensional tool that affected every aspect of global politics, including military strategy, diplomatic relationships, and economic influence. Intelligence operations within Germany allowed Hitler and his closest advisors to ensure that their messages were constantly reinforced by propaganda, creating an image of the Nazi regime as unstoppable and invincible. Espionage in Nazi Germany was used not only to monitor military adversaries, but also to keep the German public in line with the regime's ideology, keeping them firmly within the grip of Nazi power. Information, after all, wasn't just knowledge, it was power, and those who controlled it wielded a significant advantage. Espionage was, in essence, a political weapon, an instrument for controlling narratives, and a means of shaping the future of global power dynamics. For the Allies, managing the delicate balance between secrecy and diplomacy was crucial. One of the greatest challenges for Allied leaders was keeping vital intelligence under wraps to avoid tipping off the Axis powers, but at the same time, ensuring that they could use intelligence to secure advantageous post-war positions. Espionage wasn't just a wartime tool, it had long-term consequences that shaped the post-war order. Its power was not just in gathering intelligence, but in manipulating that intelligence for strategic purposes. Leaders used espionage not only to anticipate enemy movements but to manage perceptions, both domestically and internationally. Espionage became a mechanism for ensuring that decisions, whether military or diplomatic, could be guided by secrets that, if revealed, would alter the entire trajectory of the war. The true power of espionage lay not only in the secrets it helped uncover, but in how those secrets were manipulated and controlled by the political elite. Espionage during World War II was deeply entwined with political strategy, often operating as a silent partner to military operations. In many cases, the elite class comprising of heads of state, military officials, and influential figures in business and media understood the power of controlling information. Take, for instance, Winston Churchill and his involvement with MI6, the British intelligence agency. Churchill's understanding of espionage was comprehensive. Similarly, Adolf Hitler used espionage to sustain his control over the Nazi regime. However, despite their efforts to manipulate public perception through espionage, Hitler's leadership was marred by a mistrust of the intelligence he received. Espionage also played an essential role in shaping the post-war political landscape. A prime example of this delicate balance is the Manhattan Project, the US initiative that led to the development of the atomic bomb. In fact, Soviet spies, like Klaus Fuchs, who had infiltrated key sectors of the Manhattan Project, accelerated the Soviet nuclear program by passing along crucial information. For the United States, the need to protect the atomic secret and maintain diplomatic relations with the Soviets required both secrecy and careful political strategy. As World War II came to a close, espionage's influence didn't fade, it evolved. Espionage also became central to economic strategies. The Cold War was not just fought through proxy wars and military confrontations, it was fought on the economic stage as well. In Nazi Germany, the failure of their espionage system marked by internal distrust, The ultimate legacy of espionage during World War II was its ability to shape global power structures not just in military terms, but in the realm of politics and diplomacy. As the Cold War unfolded, espionage became the backbone of political and military operations, with global superpowers using it to shape international relations. Espionage in World War II, particularly in the hands of the elite class, left an indelible mark on the way power is managed in the modern world, as we continue to explore the world of espionage in our next segment. As we've seen in the previous segments, espionage was not solely confined to government offices, military headquarters, or underground intelligence agencies. The world of espionage during World War II had a profound and far-reaching impact, influencing not just military outcomes and political power, but also the lives of ordinary civilians who were, often unknowingly, caught in the tangled web of covert operations. The influence of espionage on the social fabric was profound. It shaped public opinion, guided economic policies, and manipulated the way people perceived their roles in the larger context of the war. Espionage's effects rippled through every aspect of life, from the media to personal relationships, from economic systems to the very way the public perceived the war effort. While intelligence services gathered critical data on military operations, spies also worked to shape perceptions by spreading disinformation, manipulating the press, and using psychological tactics to control public sentiment. The Nazi regime used intelligence not only to gather information about its enemies, but to craft a fictionalized narrative of Nazi supremacy and the need for war. Through the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, led by Joseph Goebbels, the Nazis manipulated public perception on an industrial scale. Espionage was not limited to the battlefield or intelligence gathering. It was deeply embedded in the economic machinery that sustained the war effort. Espionage was used to suppress dissent, control the media, and repress any signs of rebellion, while reinforcing Nazi ideology. Information was filtered through the propaganda machine, which twisted facts and fabricated stories to maintain public morale and justify the regime's actions, both at home and abroad. The Third Reich's leadership used intelligence to ensure that the economy was maximized for military production, while keeping the German populace largely unaware of the true consequences of their wartime sacrifices. Domestic espionage, the monitoring of civilians for signs of disloyalty, suspicion, or dissent, was a regular feature of life during the war, particularly in Nazi Germany and in occupied territories. In Germany, the Gestapo and SS worked tirelessly to root out subversive elements, whether they were opponents of the regime, ethnic minorities, or resistance groups. The constant fear of being watched, the suspicion of neighbors and family members, and the paranoia of living under a totalitarian regime created an environment where distrust was widespread. The fear of being denounced for even the most innocent of actions, whether it was helping a neighbor or discussing the war in private, was a constant source of stress. Families were divided, neighbors turned against each other, and trust became a luxury few could afford. They feared each other, knowing that any slip-up could lead to betrayal. As we move forward, we'll uncover more untold stories of how it shaped the post-war world and how its shadow still looms over the modern age of intelligence and politics. The fear of spies infiltrating the civilian population led to increased surveillance, censorship, and even the questioning of loyalty. Espionage wasn't just about military secrets, it was about preserving the integrity of the war effort at every level of society. Civilians were encouraged to report suspicious behavior and were bombarded with propaganda that emphasized the need for vigilance. Espionage caused a kind of psychological strain that affected the everyday lives of those who were, in many cases, unknowingly involved in the covert operations of the war and intelligence strategies that defined World War II. Espionage was its deep and lasting impact on the civilian population, from propaganda to economic, from the fear of betrayal to the psychological toll of living in a world where espionage permeated every aspect of life. The effects of wartime intelligence shaped the experiences of millions. For everyday Germans, the very act of speaking out against the regime or even expressing concerns about the war could mean prison or death. The fear of being watched and the constant threat of betrayal pervaded daily life. As the war progressed and the Allied forces closed in, Germany's industrial capacity weakened, and espionage, both domestic and foreign, became a last line of defense against complete economic collapse. Media became an essential part of the espionage infrastructure, with newspapers, radio broadcasts, and film becoming vehicles for state-sponsored messaging, ensuring their loyalty to the war effort. and manipulating the way people thought about their role in the global conflict. The French resistance operated in the shadows, often having to trust neighbors or local civilians, who may have been informants for the Nazis. The success of these resistance movements relied not just on covert operations, but also on the trust and cooperation of ordinary citizens. Civilians had to carefully navigate a world where everyone could be a potential spy, whether for the Axis or the Allies. Espionage didn't just involve spies working in secrecy, it required the careful manipulation of public narratives. The spread of misinformation. The British and Americans used intelligence networks to infiltrate Axis-controlled territories, sabotage factories, and even disrupt enemy currencies. Rationing, for example, wasn't just about ensuring that there was enough for the troops. It was a direct result of intelligence on Axis supply chains and efforts to preserve resources for the war effort. Civilians were forced to adapt to life under scarcity. Whether through the collection of scrap metal or the rationing of food, and intelligence played a central role in ensuring that the supplies most critical to victory were kept under control. The Allied bombing campaigns, backed by intelligence on the locations of key German industrial sites, helped cripple Nazi Germany's ability to produce war materials, forcing them to fight with depleted resources. But it wasn't simply about informing the public, it was about controlling the narrative. The OWI used films, posters, and radio broadcasts to create a sense of unity and purpose. Ordinary citizens were encouraged to see themselves as part of a greater collective effort, one in which every action, from rationing to recycling, contributed to the war effort. Propaganda films, like Why We Fight, were used to boost morale and justify the war effort, while also demonizing the enemy and reinforcing the idea of a righteous battle for freedom, and the control of the information flow that shaped how the civilian population viewed the war. The use of propaganda, psychological warfare, and domestic espionage affected the way people lived, how they thought about the war, and how they interacted with each other and the world around them. From the Allied nations to Nazi Germany, the civilian population was consistently fed controlled narratives that either bolstered support for the war effort or kept them complacent in the face of wartime hardships. Espionage and propaganda were inseparable during World War II. In the United States, the Office of War Information was responsible for using the media to rally the public behind the war effort. In Nazi Germany, propaganda was even more central to maintaining control over the German public. Espionage, therefore, wasn't just about secret missions. It was about controlling information, shaping the very ideas and beliefs of civilians. Another key aspect of how espionage influenced civilians was through its direct impact on economic policy. For the Allied forces, espionage operations aimed at disrupting enemy supply chains, intercepting shipments, and sabotaging industrial production were crucial to weakening the Axis powers. On the home front, however, the civilian population felt the consequences of economic espionage as well. In Nazi Germany, espionage also played a crucial role in protecting the war economy. Espionage was also deeply embedded in the daily lives of ordinary citizens, even if they were unaware of it. In occupied Europe, espionage was a constant presence in the lives of civilians. Espionage didn't just impact civilians through economic hardship or political propaganda. In Nazi-occupied territories, for example, civilians had to live with a constant knowledge that informants were everywhere. On the home front in the United States and Britain, even though the war was fought overseas, civilians felt the weight of espionage in more subtle ways. As we conclude our exploration of the social consequences of espionage, we see that it wasn't just the high-level operations. Espionage didn't just decide battles, it influenced the very social fabric of the countries at war, altering how people lived, how they thought, and how they interacted with their governments and neighbors. As we continue to explore the impact of espionage, it is clear that its influence didn't simply dissipate after the conclusion of World War II. The legacy of intelligence operations during the war has shaped not only military strategy and political decisions, but also the very structure of global society. The CIA, the KGB, MI6, and other intelligence agencies that rose to prominence post-war would become major players in shaping international relations, covert operations, and foreign policy. In the decades following the war, the Cold War served as a battleground where espionage operations weren't just about gathering intelligence. They were about ideological battles, proxy wars, and the survival of superpowers. After the war, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, each vying for global dominance. And as much as military might shaped the rivalry between these two nations, espionage was equally pivotal in this geopolitical battle. The CIA and the KGB were involved in covert operations designed to topple governments, subvert elections, and influence public opinion across the globe, and Chile, all of which were key parts of the United States strategy to stop the spread of communism. Similarly, the KGB interfered in Eastern Europe, supporting communist revolutions and crushing resistance movements to maintain Soviet dominance. As the world's technology has advanced, espionage operations have had to evolve. Today, intelligence agencies are focused on cyber data surveillance and counterintelligence operations designed to combat terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and global instability. By using espionage to build alliances, gather intelligence, and weaken adversaries, the US maintained its dominance in the Western world. The Soviet Union, likewise, used its espionage network to spread communism, influence Eastern Europe, and engage in proxy wars around the globe. Spies like Alan Turing, Virginia Hall, and countless others sacrificed personal identities, relationships, and even their lives for the greater good. Many went unrecognized or forgotten, their contributions not fully understood until years after the war had ended. Both superpowers relied on espionage to ensure their survival during the Cold War and beyond. It was used to determine the outcome of wars, but it also had a profound effect on the social fabric and geopolitical structures of the post-war world. Espionage impacted political strategies, global diplomacy, and the everyday lives of those who lived through the conflict. Families were torn apart by betrayals, suspicions, and unfathomable secrets. The impact of intelligence, whether through military strategy, economic espionage, or diplomatic influence, has become deeply embedded in modern global politics. Yet the cost of secrecy was high, and the true impact of espionage extended far beyond the spy stories we often hear. The quiet power of espionage, though rarely acknowledged, was crucial in shaping the course of history, and its legacy endures in intelligence agencies and global strategies to this very day. It shaped not only the war's outcome, but also the very nature of post-war society, influencing how nations would relate to each other in the decades to come. Double agents had to live with the constant threat of exposure. Some were executed for their betrayals, while others were forced into lives of silence and exile. The paranoia created by espionage left deep psychological scars on everyone involved, whether they were spies, soldiers, or civilians. The infrastructure established by World War II espionage operations has facilitated this, ensuring that espionage remains a vital component of modern diplomacy and security. The elite class that controlled espionage during World War II held the keys to global dominance, and their decisions continue to shape how world powers interact today. The use of disinformation and PIC ops became standard practice, and entire nations were manipulated into aligning with superpowers. The way in which World War II espionage influenced the balance of power between nations is a testament to the long-term effects of intelligence operations on world history. Espionage didn't just affect the military outcomes of the war, it shaped the very political order of the post-war world. The CIA and the KGB were the twin pillars of espionage during the Cold War, tasked with spying, counterintelligence, and covert operations on behalf of their respective governments. The espionage methods and networks developed during World War II became the foundation for the Cold War and the intelligence agencies that would dominate the global stage for decades to come. The intelligence agencies established in the aftermath of the war, such as the CIA, MI6, and the KGB, laid the groundwork for modern counterintelligence efforts and the intelligence sharing networks we have today. These agencies have continued to play a central role in the global war on terror, managing cyber warfare, counter-terrorism, operations, and international surveillance. The world of intelligence that emerged from the shadows of World War II was complex, sophisticated, and, at times, morally ambiguous. But beyond these global power struggles, the shadow of World War II espionage would continue to affect the lives of countless individuals, from the elite to the everyday citizens, caught up in espionage's wake. Espionage became a form of warfare that operated in the shadows, with spies, agents, and informants acting as the soldiers of this conflict. From high-profile espionage cases, such as the U-2 incident, where the CIA's high-altitude spy plane was shot down over Soviet territory, to covert operations in places like Cuba, Vietnam, and Berlin, the Cold War espionage campaigns were critical in determining the fate of nations. The Cold War was, in many ways, the offspring of World War II's espionage operations. The intelligence methods honed during World War II would be used by both superpowers to gain the upper hand in the Cold War. However, espionage during the Cold War didn't just focus on military intelligence, it also heavily influenced politics. For example, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of governments in Iran, Guatemala. While the Cold War officially ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 19, the legacy of espionage during World War II continues to shape global intelligence practices and international diplomacy today. Espionage has not only been used to gain political advantage, but also to address new global threats. The role of espionage in shaping global power dynamics cannot be understated. For the United States, intelligence operations during and after World War II helped to cement their position as a global superpower. Espionage has always been a crucial part of the global power structure, whether it's the political decisions made by leaders, the war strategies employed by military commanders, or the economic policies that have been influenced by intelligence. While much of the discussion around World War II espionage focuses on political strategy and global power, we must not forget the human cost of these covert operations. For ordinary civilians caught in the web of espionage, the costs were just as high. Espionage, in many ways, was a silent war fought with information, manipulation, and secrecy. As we conclude this journey into the world of World War II, we come to understand that espionage was never just a tool for collecting military intelligence. It was, and continues to be, a tool of power, control, and shaping history. While many of the individuals involved in these covert operations remain unsung heroes, their legacies continue to shape the world we live in today. As we reflect on espionage's long shadow, it's important to remember that intelligence work, though often hidden in the shadows, has shaped our world in ways we still feel today.